Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if Naruto was son of traveler god Neptune? Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story for granting us permission to use it in our YouTube video. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. The author's creation and the original stories link in the descriptions. Please do check that first. Now enjoy the video. Naruto grabbed his head in pain, his heart pounding like a kick drum in his chest as he fell to his knees. It took all his strength not to fall forward, to not give in to the sweet release unconsciousness would offer. The world swirled around him as he tried to get the painful images out of his head. Kakashi-sensei's dead body. Hinata-chan being blasted away with the Shinra Tensei and stabbed with Pain's blade. Obasan falling into a coma. Fukasaku telling him of Jiraiya's death. Like a mantra, he mumbled, "Go away, but no sound came out, leaving him mouthing words like as if he was reciting a prayer or a curse. Drip drop, his mindscape was dark, steel pipes hissing and dripping water at a constant rate. His hands grabbed his spiky blonde hair by the roots, threatening to pull it out as he edged closer and closer to insanity. It would be so easy to give in. To just leave this world and go meet Jiraiya's sensei, Kakashi-sensei, Gigi, Dad and Mom. It would be easy to leave the village to fend for themselves. After all, the villagers didn't like him that much. It would be so easy to just be another name on the memorial stone. His cerulean blue eyes looked down at the murky water below, staring back at himself. His whisker marks seemed thicker, more feral, and his tan skin seemed to have lost its color. He looked like a ghost, another lost to the endless stream of hatred. A hero's worst enemy was himself. Thump thump thump. His head throbbed with a migraine of the likes he had never felt before. The walls felt like they were closing in and he felt claustrophobic for the first time in his life. Prophecy. Hero. Protect. Save. It was too much. Too much responsibility. Too much pressure. Too much pain to deal with along the way. Thump thump thump. Destroy everything that hurts you. Naruto cast his gaze up and snarled, as he stared into crimson eyes as wild and crazy as his own. Locked behind cell bars was a towering entity that radiated so much power and hate, Naruto could feel it deep in his chest. Thump thump thump. This was the reason why the Akatsuki was after him. It was the Kyuubi, a chakra being known as a Biju that attacked Konohagakure no Sato 16 years ago and was sealed inside of him by the Yondaime Hokage the day he was born. The Akatsuki was an organization of 10 S-rank ninja who were after the Biju for some reason. This was the reason why his life had been a hell. The reason why the gods had cursed him and made every minute of his life a struggle. Between the apathy that he had been forced to endure as a child, to the attacks from the Akatsuki, to the destruction of his village. But now, it would be his key to the destruction of pain. Give your heart to me, I will save you from the pain. Thump thump thump. Slowly, the Hake no Fuin Shiki, 8 trigrams ceiling style, on Naruto's stomach began to swirl and drip as ink dripped from the intricate design. Gone was the signature swirl design of Uzumaki Fuinjutsu, and instead was a void of pitch-black ink that seemed empty. Naruto stared into the fox's hate-filled crimson eyes and remembered Nagato's condescending words. How will you face this hatred in order to build peace? Arg! Naruto roared like an animal as he grabbed his head tighter. The pain was mind-numbing. The images flashing through his head made him want to commit seppuku. It would be so easy, so easy. I will save you. Thump 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 thump. Slowly, the azure blue of his eyes morphed into a solid white as all conscious thought left him and he gave into his primal instinct. The one he had concealed all his life under false smiles and forced enthusiasm. The one he hid when he watched Sasuke being asked out by Sakura. When Kakashi taught Sasuke the Chidori and ignored him. When Orochimaru attacked the village and killed Gigi. When Sasuke left the village. When Jiraiya-sensei decided to go alone, and got himself killed. It was then Naruto Uzumaki finally gave into something that shaped his life from the start: rage. The Biju flashed a hysterical grin as it realized his success. Use my power and destroy. There was dead silence in Konohagakure no Sato as the residents watched in horror as their hero was sealed inside of what looked like a small moon. Naruto-kun, Hinata mumbled, unconsciously. Hinata's long black hair was spread around her like a halo and her white eyes were shut but kept twitching every few seconds like she was trying to get rid of a nightmare she was having. She was laying down on the white tiled floor of the Konoha hospital while Sakura Haruno hovered over her. "Will Lady Hinata be okay?" A teenager with long black hair and eyes as white as ivory. His name was Neji Hyuga and he was a member of the Hyuga branch clan. Not to mention Hinata's cousin. He was once a teen obsessed with fate as he thought that fate was the reason that his father was killed. However, after getting his ass kicked in the Chunin exams to Naruto, he learned people made their own fate. "She'll be fine," Sakura responded as she pushed green medical chakra into the Hinata's chest. She had trained for 3 years under Tsunade Senju, the Godem Hokage and the greatest Iryo nin in the world, thus was one of the greatest medical ninjas in Konoha in her own right. She'd be damned if she let a comrade die. She looked upwards toward the small moon and sighed. If only Naruto knew that. "Use my power, it will set you free." Naruto stood up, his empty white eyes void of all emotion. There was no more caution, worry, fear. "Use my power, destroy your enemies." Nothing hurt anymore. Everything was so simple now. Kill pain. Destroy the Akatsuki. Kill pain. Destroy the Akatsuki. Kill pain. Use my power and set me free. Naruto stepped forward, his sandals making ripples in the water with every step. He reached forward, placing a hand on the piece of paper on the Kyuubi's seal that had the kanji for seal. "Free me." The Kyuubi yelled as Naruto was about to rip off the seal only for his arm to be grabbed by a man with a strong grip. Naruto jolted in surprise and turned, following the black-sleeved arm up to a short-sleeved white jacket with the kanji for Yandaime. Hokage. On the back. He continued to follow the arm up to see a man with bright gold hair like his and eyes as blue as the sky, like his. In fact, if Naruto didn't know better, he would have thought he was looking at a version of himself from the future. Yandaime. Fourth. The Kyuubi yelled as it slammed a claw against the cell doors. In an instant, the Yandaime Hokage grabbed Naruto around the waist and pulled him away so they wouldn't be caught by the Biju's attack. "The seal was set so if you were close to releasing the Kyuubi, it would summon me. I never wanted it to happen and I wanted to see you again, you crazy fox." Minato mused to himself before turning to look Naruto in the eyes. "But I got to see my son grown up so I'll save. It was an even trade," he said with a smile, enjoying Naruto's look of shock. Arg. All the occupants of Konoha looked up in surprise. Resting on top of the small moon was the Kyuubi. Well, almost. It was a skinless kitsune with 8 blood-red tails whipping around. Its crimson eyes kept shifting as it looked for its enemies and its fangs glistened like polished daggers. This was the beast that had attacked Konoha 16 years ago. The beast that had turned women into widows, children to orphans, families into grievers. This wasn't Naruto Uzumaki anymore. This was the Kyuubi. Arg! It roared, sending shockwaves that could be felt for miles around. "Well shit." The Diva Path mumbled under his breath as he prepared a Shinra Tensai. "Come here Yandaime so I can rip you to shreds." The Kyuubi roared as it bared its fangs at the 4th leader of Konoha. "I like my body the way it is. Thank you very much. You should work on your attitude, don't you agree Naruto?" Minato said with a grin. "That's my name," Naruto said with surprise. Minato chuckled at Naruto's puzzled expression. "I know, I gave it to you." Naruto's eyes widened. "That means, yeah, you're my son," Minato said with a smile. For a second, a life where he had both parents flashed before his eyes. He imagined being Konohamaru and kicking down the door to the Hokage's office to see Kakashi debriefing Minato on a mission only for Naruto to trip on his replica of his father's jacket. He imagined showing his mom his storage scroll he made and her hugging him and promising ramen. He imagined learning the Rasengan and Jiraiya and Minato ruffling his hair and giving him that same smile when he finally did it. "Die Yandaime." The Kyuubi yelled as it began to charge a Bijudama. Positive and negative chakra began to swirl and condense into a ball of supercharged energy that would cause both of their deaths. "Let's go somewhere a little bit more quiet," Minato offered before snapping his fingers. Instantly, they were no longer in a dark sewer with an angry fox charging a nuke. Instead they were in a room that was pure white and seemed to extend forever. "So I guess Sarutobi Oji-san never told you," Minato said. He sighed when he saw Naruto's nod. "Throughout my life, I have made a lot of enemies that would not hesitate to kill a newborn if they knew it was my child. Especially if they knew my son was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, he explained. Tears began to flow from Naruto's eyes, and before the fastest man in history could react, Naruto drove a fist into his gut. Minato doubled over in pain and surprise, but that turned into sadness when he heard one of Naruto's tears strike the floor. How could you do it? How could you seal the Biju into your own son? I was forced to be alone, to push myself on the swing set, to teach myself how to do the henge and throw shuriken. I had to watch all my friends go home to their families, Naruto screamed, wanting to release all of the anger and confusion he had suffered for the last 16 years. Why? Naruto mumbled as he rubbed the tears out of his eyes. Minato sighed. I'm sorry, Naruto. Naruto asked his father. How are you here? I'm here in my main body. It was time you became a hero and defended both of your homes, Minato explained. Naruto stopped and looked up, confusion evident on his face. Main body? You know me as Minato Namikaze, but I am actually a Greek god. The elemental nations is actually just one of 8 continents on Earth. It's hidden by a genjutsu-like mist that blocks it from all mortal sensors and visitors, Minato said with a sigh. It was always hard to explain. At least Naruto wasn't getting violent or vengeful like Kushina. After she had chased him through Konoha with a rusty kunai, he had to sleep on the couch for a month. Crazy red-headed Tsunere. Greek god? Naruto said slowly, trying to understand. Yes, and once you defeat pain, my world requires your assistance. There are others like you, other half-bloods, and now there is an enemy that they cannot defeat without your help, Minato explained, avoiding the part of the story that Naruto was always supposed to come help the Olympians regardless. After all, it was foretold in prophecy. Okay Dad, I'll do it, Naruto said with a grin. Minato, or whatever his name was, smiled. Here, to make up for some of the birthdays I missed. He then reached into a pocket of his jacket and handed Naruto an elegant katana. The blade was in the Kisaki Moroha style and had a blade about 80 centimeters, making it a perfect size for him. Its sheath and blade were made of a weird bronze metal that shone like chakra steel but was unlike anything Naruto had ever seen before. The tsukamaki of the weapon was wrapped carefully with black silk. When Naruto felt the blade, he could tell from his lessons with Asuma-sensei that the blade was forged with the Soshukati, 7 layers method, a style famous for making the strongest blades possible. Minato stepped forever and placed a hand on Naruto's forehead, and to give back what I took 16 years ago. Minato's hands glowed with white light and Naruto felt lighter, more powerful, like he could lift the Hokage monument with ease. It was after if all his life, he had been held down with weights like leaves, but now they were off, he was free. When you get to America, find this address, Minato advised as he handed Naruto a slip of paper. Naruto was going to ask his father more questions when Minato began to glow with light. I guess your grandfather needs me. Goodbye my son. Oh, and close your eyes. Bye Dad. I guess I'll see you around, Naruto said before he was forced to close his eyes as the light began to become painful. Once the light receded, Naruto realized something. Wait Dad, what's your real name? However, once again, the young Uzumaki was alone, although not as much as he once was. Pain looked up at the moon and his eyes narrowed. No longer was it the Kyuubi radiating power on the small moon. No, now it was Naruto Uzumaki, and that was much more dangerous to the Rinnegan wielder. Get ready for your ass to get kicked, Uzumaki style, Naruto cried as he watched Pain closely with his toad-like eyes. Suddenly he disappeared in a burst of speed, reappearing in front of Pain in an instant. He's faster, a lot faster, Pain thought to himself. Faster than the Rinnegan user could follow. Naruto had moved over a kilometer. You, Naruto yelled as he struck Pain in the stomach with a senjutsu-enhanced sidekick. The orange-haired diva path flew back like he had been struck with his own Shinra Tensei, only to hit Naruto again. In the second that Pain was airborne, Naruto had disappeared with a burst of speed so fast, it caused a sonic boom. Zoo! He yelled as he punched Pain in the face so hard, he almost knocked out one of his piercings. The diva path flew backwards only to hit Naruto's fist once more. However, just before he could fly like a pinball once more, he was hit on the other side of the head with a roundhouse kick, sending him upwards. With a fox-like grin, Naruto disappeared only to reappear above Pain for the final time. The Rinnegan wielder's eyes widened when he saw Naruto's Senjutsu chakra-coated foot above him. Uzumaki Naruto Renden. Naruto Uzumaki combo. Naruto yelled. He slammed his heel downwards with an axe kick that would make Tsunade proud. Naruto's heel hit Pain in the face and slammed into the ground with so much force, it made a crater and made a dust cloud that restricted all vision. There was a silence as the dust slowly cleared, revealing Pain sprawled out in a crater rather, pain-shaped. The reincarnated path groaned as it stood up and began coughing blood. Is cough that cough all you got? Naruto rolled his eyes and Pain frowned. Shinra Tensei. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise for a second as he was sent blasting backwards only for him to twist midair and land with a hand on the floor to balance himself. Is that all you got? Naruto taunted with a smirk on his face. Pain growled before turning a fist out toward Naruto. Bansho Tenin. A force grabbed Naruto and sent him flying toward Pain, who pulled out a chakra rod, ready to impale the blonde demigod. Naruto grinned as he flew toward the orange-haired path. In his hand formed a blue ball of spirally chakra. Slowly, wind blades began to gather within the ball before extending outwards into 4 curved blades, making it look like a giant shuriken. Rasen Shuriken. Naruto yelled as he threw the S-ranked technique at the leader of the Akatsuki with deadly precision. Pain's purple eyes widened in shock before he quickly opened his fist. Shinra Tensei. Both the chakra weapon and the young Uzumaki were sent blasting backwards, and this time, Naruto's landing wasn't so graceful. He struck the ground with his back and bounced, causing him to strike one of the few remaining walls. He sighed as he drew his new katana and bent his knees, sliding into a Batojutsu stance he remembered Gekko using. 5 seconds, my dear masochist, Naruto said with a grin as he took off. By now, he was a blur with his red coat fluttering in the wind. Anyone who watched him would feel a hint of nostalgia as the last time they saw a man move that fast. He was wearing a white cloak with red flames. 2. With every step Naruto took, a crack formed in the ground and there was a sonic boom that shook the ruined buildings around him. 3. Pain's eyes widened in surprise. The ground around Naruto was being set on fire with every step and the heat was slowly getting closer. 4. With a final mighty step, Naruto disappeared. No shimmer, no flash, no vortex, just disappeared. I guess that was all that you had. Pain looked down and wasn't really surprised to see a bronze blade pierced through his chest. He was even less surprised when he saw the katana was in the hands of Naruto Uzumaki, son of the Yondaime Hokage, sage of Mount Myobokuzan and hero of Konohagakure no Sato. Pain slumped forward before falling to the ground with a thump. With a sigh, Naruto reached forward and picked up one of the chakra rods that had impaled him before. His eyes closed before opening once more, now yellow with black bars. Instantly, he knew where Pain was due to the tracking ability of Sage Mode. You're mine, Naruto whispered under his breath before disappearing. Although this time, he would not be returning to Konoha. Naruto looked down at the slip of paper with a furrowed brow. 7663 San Francisco Bay? He looked around with confusion. He was on the bay but he was seeing no camp. Suddenly, he felt the sunbeam directly into his eyes and he was forced to shut them for a moment. When they were open, he saw what he had been missing. That's some genjutsu, he mumbled under his breath. Before him was something beyond a camp. It was huge, with a lake and a deep river that seemed to encircle the entire camp. Each of the buildings were built with gorgeous white marble and had huge columns in the Doric style supporting them. On many of the hills there were large temples for different gods. There was even a huge field with what looked like catapults and other siege equipment. Oh, he was gonna have fun here. Naruto was just about to walk inside when he felt something on the small of his back, and by the way it felt, it was sharp. Who are you? Naruto, however, wasn't worried and was more focused on the camp. It's beautiful. Yes, it is. He heard the person about to shish kebab him admit, and by the tone, he could tell it was a girl. He quickly whipped around before she could react, grabbing the head of the spear and stabbing it into the ground before looking up at her. Whoa, the girl was about his age if not a bit younger and had tan skin slightly darker than his. Long black hair as dark as midnight tied in a braid cascaded down one shoulder and her eyes were a black so sharp, they pierced into his soul. She was wearing a gold chest plate over a purple t-shirt and yoga shorts which did not hide anything from Naruto's wandering eye. Damn it, Ero Sennin, he never really paid attention to girls much. Sakura was more of a psychological need for an object of affection than actual love. Hinata was nice, but he hadn't really spent time with her since that time when they were young. Naruto noticed the girl was short compared to him, only coming to his shoulder, but her build and posture made up for it. Overall, she was both beautiful, deadly, and looked like she would kill him if he did anything stupid. Just the kind of girl he needed in his life. About as beautiful as you, Naruto mumbled under his breath. The girl growled and lunged at him with the dagger strapped to her waist. Naruto's eyes widened as he wasn't expecting an attack and stepped back, tripping over the gold spear on the ground. He fell back, accidentally grabbing her hand and pulling her down with him. He landed on his back, her on his waist and straddling him. She quickly placed her dagger to his neck and pinned down both of his arms with her thighs. "Who are you?" "Naruto Uzumaki, demigod," Naruto introduced. He would have put out his hand for her to shake, but they were both incapacitated for a moment. The girl paused and stared into his eyes, looking for deceit before sighing and releasing his arms from their restraints. She put out her hand to Naruto. "Reina Avila Ramirez Arellano, daughter of Bologna and legionnaire of the 5th cohort." Naruto grinned his foxy grin and took her hand. "Nice to meet you, Reina-chan." The two sat there for a moment before Naruto blushed a bright red. Reina-chan, could you please move your butt off of my crotch?" Reina nodded quickly before standing up, allowing Naruto to stand up and stretch. It was only then Reina really took him in. His spiky gold hair and blue eyes, his unusual attire and his weapons strapped to his waist. "You're an odd one," Reina admitted as she watched Naruto do a few jumping jacks so that blood would move away from parts of him. Naruto stopped his exercise and grinned. "I could say the same about you." Reina sighed and began walking. "Come, I'll take you to the praetors so they can see if you're worthy of the Legion." Naruto threw an arm around her shoulder and gestured out toward the beauty of New Rome. "Ah, this is a start of a beautiful friendship." "Don't touch me, okay." It had been a year and a half since Naruto appeared at Camp Jupiter, and he quickly rose through the ranks. After earning a spot in the 5th cohort, he was quickly elected Centurion along with Gwen after he helped the 5th defeat the 1st and 2nd in his first war games. Overall, he was very dignified and rolling around at the speed of sound. "Got places to go. Gotta follow my rainbow," Naruto yelled as he ran laps around New Rome at close to the speed of sound. The only thing anyone who was watching would be able to see was a blur of black and purple, and every time he reached the Caldecott tunnel, Frank would draw another mark on her tally system. Currently, he was at 9. Usually the job of being sentry for the tunnel was the most boring job ever, but when Naruto was around, nothing was ever boring. Hazel was one of the people Naruto was closest to, and he was the one who stood for her, allowing her to be recruited into the Legion. Despite being only 13, she usually the most mature of the three and often was the one who reined Naruto in. If it wasn't for her cocoa skin and cinnamon hair, Naruto would have thought she was his long-lost sister. Frank, on the other hand, was Naruto's innocent little brother and often had to be the one that was forced to testify in Naruto's defense to Naruto's girlfriend. Bless his poor Chinese-Canadian soul. "Is that the only song you know?" Hazel asked as Naruto came around for a 10th time and stopped, barely breathing heavy. He was wearing a pair of black jeans and a short-sleeve purple Camp Jupiter t-shirt. Over this, he wore a black Konoha flak jacket, a gift from his father. On his feet was a pair of black sandals with black wings on the side, and tucked into his waistband was a small bronze Swiss Army knife. Around his neck was an odd necklace with 3 pendants. One was an odd swirl with a point making it look like a leaf. The second was a weird sickle-shaped line but with another horizontal line going through the middle. The last was stick with 2 snakes wrapped around it. "I also know Sign by Flow and Closer by Joe Inoue, but none of you guys know Japanese," Naruto complained. Suddenly his eyes widened as he released something. "Oh Frankie, I know a song you'll love. The internet is for porn. The internet is for porn." Naruto began to sing and do an odd dance similar to what Ero Sennin used to. Frank sighed and fell to his knees and began to pray. "Save me, Father. Why's you think the net was born? Porn, porn, porn." Naruto sang at the top of his lungs, but before Hazel to yell at him for his childishness, there was a crash. In an instant Naruto's ninja instincts kicked gear and he drew his Swiss Army knife, which quickly morphed into a beautiful bronze katana. "What was that?" Frank said as he stood up and pulled his bow from his back. "I don't know, let's check it out," Naruto said as he walked out of the tunnel. It would be lying to say he was shocked to see a teenage boy carrying an elderly hippie lady. Half of Kakashi-sensei and Bushier Brows-sensei's challenges were weirder than this. Nevertheless, Naruto grinned when he saw the two Gorgons chasing the boy. "Ah, my dear Frankie-kun, Zelly-chan, this is going to go down in history." Percy Jackson was having a shitty day. First, he lost his memories. Then, he was taken in by an aggressive wolf goddess that would have eaten him if he showed weakness. Then he was chased by angry Gorgon ladies that would not stay dead. Sounded like a bad ex-girlfriend. Girlfriend, Annabeth, wait, what was he talking about again? Oh yeah, finally he gets to the camp he had been looking for 2 months and now he had to carry a weird old lady that was getting heavier every moment. Just a day in the life of Percy Jackson, over here. Percy's head shot up to see 3 people waving at him at the tunnel. Percy was about to smile when he heard a growl behind him, and when he turned around, he wasn't surprised to see Steno about to lunge at him. However, before he be killed, one of the guards disappeared in a burst of speed. "I gotcha." When the blonde guy reappeared, his weird-looking sword was already out of its sheath and slicing through the air. Without even stopping, it continued through the head of the crazy cashier from Bargain Mart, causing the Gorgon to dissolve into gold dust. "Need help there?" the guard asked, gesturing toward the hippie in Percy's arms as he resheathed his katana with the ease of a master. Percy shook his head and shifted June's weight in his arms so he was a little more comfortable. "Nah, I have to do this." The guard nodded and placed a hand on his waist. In a fluid motion that was almost too fast for Percy to follow, the guard's sword flew from its sheath and decapitated Steno. The guard then resheathed the weapon and stepped forward, disappearing in a blur of black and purple only to reappear next to Urieli, his sword already out and past her. Slowly his blade slid into its sheath before making a chink noise as it fully slipped into its housing. With a thud, the head of the Gorgon struck the floor, a look of shock still on her face. Percy was about to say his thanks when slowly the pile of gold dust that was once Steno began to swirl, signifying she was going to reform. "Do they die?" the guard asked, only to sigh when Percy shook his head. "That's what I thought you were going to say," the blonde teen mumbled as he disappeared again, only to in front of Steno's reformed head. He brought his foot back before kicking the Gorgon's head like a soccer ball. It soared through the air before slamming straight into the other Gorgon's chest, resulting in them both dissolving into gold dust once more. The guard jumped into the air and shot his hands to the sky. Goal. Once he was done with his celebration, the guard placed a hand out to Percy. "Naruto Uzumaki, son of Mercury, champion of Ceres, Centurion of the 5th cohort and resident badass of Camp Jupiter." Percy shifted June's weight to one arm so he could shake Naruto's Percy Jackson, resident smartass of just about everywhere. Naruto flinched for a moment before he chuckled, a mischievous grin in his face. "Oh, we're gonna get along just fine. Hey guys. Welcome to my newest Naruto PJO crossover. I haven't been able to write recently because I'm on vacation, so I decided to give you guys this. Let me know what you think." Review. Dio, I don't own Percy Jackson and the Olympians, heroes of Olympus or Naruto. They're all the property of their respective owners. Son of the Traveler and Sage of Rome. Son of Neptune Chapter 2. Family in all but blood. Frank, take Percy and the lady into camp. Hazel and I will hold them off, Naruto instructed Frank, who hesitated. Frank looked back at the gaining Gorgons, their sharp teeth and claws. If one of those got Hazel. But, Frank began, but Naruto placed a hand up to stop him. "Frank Jong, this is not a time to argue," he urged. Frank didn't respond and only nodded, an arrow on his bowstring. "Go," Naruto ordered. Frank nodded and ran off with Percy and June behind him, Percy beginning to breath heavily due to June's weight increasing. Once they were out of view, Hazel turned to him and put her hands on her hips in an attempt to be authoritative. Was it necessary to be so mean to Frank? "Yes, I can't have a frail man dating my little hazelnut," Naruto teased. Hazel blushed heavily and punched him in the shoulder but said nothing else. To be honest, Naruto felt bad for the kid, but he knew that Frank needed to toughen up a bit, especially if who Naruto thought his father was right. "Ready, Zelly?" Naruto asked his companion. The Gorgons were slowly regenerating from the gold dust, and that was not good. Usually, it took at least a week for a monster to regenerate, usually longer, but an army that couldn't die? There was no mortal army that could stand against it. "Don't call me that," Hazel mumbled as she drew her imperial gold spatha, also known as a Roman cavalry sword. Her choice of weapon came from her desire to ride horses, which Naruto assumed had to do something with her past life. Yes, Naruto knew about her past life. He had learned of it on her birthday, when Naruto found her crying on the roof of the crypt of Pluto. Nico had been out of town and Hazel had been crying because the last time her birthday came had been in the 1940s. Yes, Hazel Levesque was supposed to be 87 years old, but instead through a really stupid plan of Gia, a deal that did not go in Hazel's favor and Nico D. freaking Angelo, Hazel was instead 13 years old. "Okay, Zelly." Naruto grinned as the Gorgon by the name of Bino. No, by the name Steno. Sorry, S's can be hard with dyslexia. "Have a snack," Steno yelled as she charged at them, silver platter of crispy cheese, and wieners in hand. Those crispy cheese, and wieners were a lot more terrifying than the Gorgons. "Let's have a contest. Who can kill them the most?" Naruto asked as Uriah regenerated fully. Steno shot forward, but Hazel blocked her teeth with her spatha. "What do you mean the most?" Naruto shot forward and kicked Uriah in the face, slamming my head into the floor and dissolving her into gold dust again. "Like that?" Hazel nodded and ducked, allowing Steno to shoot forward and flip over Hazel's back. Steno did a full half somersault before landing on her back, and when she did, Hazel's spatha was driven through her face. "Ah, the wonders of training with a shinobi. That's the spirit." Naruto cheered as he watched Uriah regenerate. "I'll kill you," she cried as she charged at him, her snakes hissing and her fangs in full display. However, Naruto was ready and had already charged his right leg with Senjutsu chakra. He brought it up in a perfect chamber before unleashing his kick to the side of Uriah's face. The Senjutsu enhanced kick struck Uriah with enough force, it vaporized her into gold dust on contact. Not to mention, the wind generated by the super strong kick was enough to create a blade of wind that scattered the dust. "Come on. We have 30 seconds or so," Naruto yelled as Hazel dispatched Steno for a second time and scattered her dust around. Before Hazel could start running, however, Naruto grabbed her around the waist and threw her over his shoulder. "I got you." In a second, the two were gone as Naruto ran back to camp at a few hundred miles per hour, leaving only a pile of gold glitter and a trail of flames. Sounds like the end of one of Apollo's adult parties. It didn't take long for Naruto and Hazel to catch up to Percy, June and Frank, who had just reached the edge of the little Tiber. "Let me down," Hazel yelled as she beat on Naruto's back with her fists. It was only then that Frank looked up to see Hazel hanging off Naruto's shoulder and her ass sticking out in the air. Frank's face instantly felt like it was on fire and blood slowly began to run from his nose. Naruto also noticed this and shot enough killing intent at Frank to make the Chinese boy shiver. "Stop staring at Zelly's ass before I rip out your eyeballs, Jong." Naruto then let Hazel down, where she immediately slapped him across the whiskers. "I hate you. Why is Zelly-chan such a tsundere?" Naruto complained as he cried anime tears. It didn't hurt that much. Sakura-chan and Obasan hit harder in her sleep, but still, Hazel was so mean. Suddenly, Frank tapped him on the shoulder and pointed off into the distance toward two figures. "I thought you killed them." Naruto scowled in annoyance and sheathed his blade. "I did, they didn't stay dead." June the hippie spread out her arms out, almost punching Percy in the face. "Take me over the river." Naruto nodded and pointed to the little Tiber, the daughter of the river that flowed through Rome. "Go." The four demigods raced into the river, ignoring the Greek curses and offers of snacks as they pushed their way through the ice-cold water. The current was powerful, but all of them were strong enough to keep. "Ah!" Naruto whipped around to see Frank in the grasp of one of the Gorgons. It looked weird seeing the big koala of a Roman being held by a middle-aged woman with snakes for hair, but Naruto knew the Gorgons were strong. "Shit!" Naruto cursed as he tried to think of a plan. Luckily, he didn't have to, as two gigantic hands made of water burst from the water and grabbed the Gorgons, forcing them to drop Frank into the water. Steno and Euryale struggled in their liquid constraints but couldn't break free no matter how hard they struggled. With almost no effort at all, the watery appendages smashed the snake-haired monsters onto the bottom of the river, disintegrating the old ladies into golden dust that was washed away by the river before they could reform. Naruto grinned as he got out of the river and watched the display of badassery that Percy had just showed. Cool, son of Neptune. Percy stumbled onto the riverbank, June in his arms, his clothes steaming like he had been dropped in an acid bath. Hazel and Frank waddled their way out of the little Tiber themselves, tired but relatively unharmed. June eased herself out of Percy's arms and stretched like she was not an old lady at all. Well, that was a lovely trip. Then, if the day could get any weirder, the elderly woman grew until she was at least 7 feet tall. Her hippie outfit became an elegant blue dress and a long cloak made of goatskin. In her hand was a staff with a lotus flower that looked much more dangerous than a gladius in her hands. Looks like Yagura's staff, Naruto mused to himself as he dropped to one knee like all of the other members of the Legion that had gathered. Naruto turned his head to his left to see Reina, who was already looking at him. What happened? She mouthed to him before putting on her preacher face, as Naruto called it. Yes, Reina, the little sentry from 2 years ago, had been elected praetor last year when Johnny and Amir, the previous 2 praetors, decided they wanted to go to college. Naruto had been offered the other position, but he denied it, so instead it went to Jason Grace, son of Jupiter. He liked Jason, he was smart, cool and had a good head on his shoulders, but nevertheless, Naruto still kicked his ass when Jason tried hitting on Reina. Damn Sparky, Romans, I present to you Percy Jackson, son of Neptune. For months he has been slumbering, but now he is awake. His fate is in your hands, Juno announced. Naruto and Reina cast a look at each other. Neither said anything, but anyone watching could tell that a conversation was going on. The Feast of Fortuna is approaching, death has been chained. A war is on the rise. The Legion must be ready, she said. She drew her imperial gold gladius and pointed it in the air. Senatus Populusque Romanus. All of the Romans clapped a fist to their chest and bowed their heads. Senatus Populusque Romanus. Juno nodded her head before sheathing her weapon and disappearing in a shimmer of gold light. Too many mortals for her to go into her true form, so she used a form of high-speed movement instead of teleporting. It's like comparing the Shunshin to the Hiraishin, Naruto mused to himself. Before he could continue pondering the traveling methods of the gods, he was smacked across the face by his lovely girlfriend. Reina hadn't changed much over the last few years, although she had grown behind her imperial gold armor and golden cloak. Goddammit, Kakashi-sensei. She grabbed him by a whiskered cheek and yanked him to his feet, although she was only up to his shoulder. You idiot. You created a sonic boom that almost broke the first cohort's brackets. Gods, why are all the women in my life so aggressive? Naruto complained before casting his gaze toward the sky. Is that what Kasen was like? Reina rolled her beautiful black eyes. You're an idiot of the highest caliber. Naruto chuckled and placed an arm around Reina's shoulders. Guilty as charged, but hey, you wouldn't love me if I was normal. Reina glared at him. Don't touch me, Naruto sighed and slid his arm off of her. Same old Rei-Rei-chan. Reina frowned and turned toward Percy, who immediately began to sweat under her gaze. So a son of Neptune comes with the blessing of Juno. Percy shook the back of his head awkwardly. Look, my memory's a little fuzzy. It's gone actually. Do I know you? Reina hesitated. I am Reina, praetor of the 12th Legion, and no, I don't know you. Naruto frowned. He knew she was a bad liar, but not that bad. He'd have to teach her, as lying was a basic part of being a shinobi, or at the very least, a leader. Reina turned to Hazel, Naruto and Frank. Hazel, bring him inside. I want to question him at the Principia. Then we'll send him to Octavian. Naruto rolled his eyes at the mention of Octavian's name. We must consult the auguries before we decide what to do with him. Percy raised an eyebrow. Wait, do with me? We must know if the gods have given us to have a new recruit, Reina said, although she didn't seem to be very hopeful. She placed a hand on her dagger as she stared deep into Percy's sea-green eyes with her own obsidian black. Or a prisoner to kill. Dun dun dun. Naruto yelled as he slammed his fingers down on an imaginary piano. If the mood wasn't so tense, Percy would have facepalmed. Camp Jupiter was a weird place for Percy Jackson. One minute you were in front of 3 Roman guards decked out in full Roman armor and imperial gold weapons sharp enough to shave with. The next minute you were drinking espresso and eating muffins you bought from Bombio, the 2-headed coffee merchant. After he was interrogated by Reina with her scary dogs. Hazel took him to this huge temple on a hill where he had been forced to watch his pillow pet get murdered and mutilated by a creepy pale kid that acted like he had just had diarrhea. All of this would have been too much to take in if he had not been able to find some reliable friends, even if they were a bit eccentric. That son of a Gorgon, Hazel cursed, wishing she could use her spatha to cut off that annoying legacy's special parts. Percy raised an eyebrow in concern. "Are you okay?" Hazel snapped out of her thoughts and nodded her head. "Yeah, let's go meet my brother." Before Percy could ask more questions, the tiny girl grabbed Percy's wrist and pulled him along as she started running, as if trying to run away from the problems that seemed to follow her where she went. Apparently Hazel's demons never heard of phrase, "till death do us part." Hazel led Percy past the huge temples of Jupiter and Mars, past the tiny temples dedicated to Neptune and Bacchus, and past the beautiful garden of Venus to a small black crypt built into the side of a hill. It was hidden in the shadows, and if not for the light of the setting sun, it would have been impossible to see. It was made of black marble and a weird black metal that seemed to radiate darkness. Once they were near the crypt, they heard loud arguing from within. "I'm telling you, I already checked there," a younger voice insisted. "Fine then, it's not near the brass fortress," a slightly older and more familiar voice complained. Percy and Hazel walked into the black marble temple to see Naruto and a black-haired boy leaning over a map laying on top of a coffin. The black-haired boy was short with extremely pale skin and was wearing black jeans and a World War II aviator jacket. He had messy black hair that almost covered his eyes that were as black as midnight. He wore a chain for a belt, a black t-shirt with skull designs and a skull ring made of silver or platinum. "Hey, I brought a friend," Hazel called as she walked through the door. Naruto looked up and waved. "Hey Percy." Hazel knocked on the coffin, getting the boy's attention before she gestured toward Percy. "This is Percy Jackson, son of Neptune." "Percy, this is my brother." Nico looked like a deer in the headlights for a moment before he regained his composure and held out his pale hand. "Pleased to meet you, I'm Nico D'Angelo." Hazel had never been more terrified in her time at Camp Jupiter. It was like introducing 3 nuclear bombs to each other. Everything thought Nico was harmless, a traveling oddball. Naruto was a loud mouth, a prankster, so no one really took him that seriously until it came to battle. Hazel knew better. Once, she caught Nico and Naruto sparring. To say it was terrifying would be like saying Cerberus was a big dog. Every time Nico's pitch black sword met Naruto's glowing bronze, the earth around them seemed to crack and a mini shockwave flew from the area. Trails of flame and bone littered the ground. So much raw power saturated the air it was difficult to breathe for the New Orleans girl. In the end, she could only watch as these 2 demigods clashed, flowing though their attacks like it was all just a deadly dance. And then there was Percy Jackson. The sea-green-eyed teen ran into camp with a goddess, controlled water with so much skill that he created 2 hands that grabbed the Gorgons but left Frank alone before crushing the monsters easily. That was not ordinary demigod power. Percy's face contorted in confusion as he stared the young son of Pluto. "I know you." Naruto raised an eyebrow and looked at Nico, who just tilted his head in confusion. "Do you?" Hazel scratched the back of her head awkwardly. Percy's lost his memory, so I was wondering." The 2 demigods looked at each other before shaking their heads in unison. Never met him before. Hazel frowned. It was obvious the 2 boys knew Percy but didn't want to discuss it. Naruto and Nico looked nothing alike. Naruto was tall, Nico was short. Naruto was tan. Nico was as pale as a skeleton. Yet they were as close as friends could be, to the point that they kept secrets from their little sister. Perhaps it had something to do with Naruto's father working with Hazel and Nico's in the underworld business. Either way, the 2 boys were tight-lipped and Hazel knew she wouldn't be getting any answers right now. Naruto looked down at the map once more. "Did you tell Ray what I told you to?" Hazel gave a small laugh. "Yes, and she told me to tell you to stop calling her Ray." Naruto grabbed a celestial bronze knife that was stabbed into the map. It was not a normal dagger as it had 3 blades and a ring at the end that made it look strange and deadly. Naruto smiled at the thought. Unlikely. Percy looked between the 3 with confusion as if they were speaking a secret language. What are you talking about? Nico's face darkened, which looked odd on his pale face. Gia is rising. Gia? Percy asked with a furrowed brow. Naruto pointed to a picture on the wall of a woman in a brown dress and flowers in her hair. She had a mustache and monocle drawn on with Sharpie, and a dart was sticking out of her forehead courtesy of Naruto. The Earth Goddess. The mother of the Titans and grandmother to the gods. She is asleep most of the time but hates the gods and their children, he explained half-heartedly. Mother Earth is trying to kill us? Percy asked in surprise. Yeah, Hazel responded. Hazel explained how Saturn attacked last summer and how Camp Jupiter marched toward the Bay Area and kicked down the doors of Mount Orthes. After a long and bloody battle with Naruto and Jason fighting Koyos and Krios respectively, they defeated the Titans there and destroyed Saturn's throne. So Saturn just left? Percy asked. Nico nodded, although it looked forced. Most likely faded back into the abyss once more. But the real pro? Hazel began before being cut off by a shout from the hill. Hey! Everyone turned to see Frank jogging up the hill. He was wearing his jeans, purple Camp Jupiter shirt and a denim jacket, his hands still covered in grease from cleaning weapons. Naruto noticed Hazel seemed to be enthralled by Frank, causing him to scowl. Frank was going to have to toughen up if he was going to date Hazel. Frank reached the crypt and gave a wave. Hey Nico, Naruto. An amused smile appeared on Nico's face. Frank, Naruto frowned. Jong. Hazel punched her friend in the shoulder. Be nice. Naruto laughed, his blue eyes shining with mirth. I am being nice, you should see me be mean. I don't think Shukaku can poop the same way ever again. Frank went pale before shaking his head to rid himself of the images that were running through his head. Reina sent me to get Percy. Naruto nodded. Go take him to Ray. Hazel, Nico and I need to talk. See ya later. Percy said as Frank dragged him down the hill toward the Principia. Nico turned to his sister and best friend. We have much to discuss. So between the two of you, you've already searched a corner of Tartarus? Hazel exclaimed in surprise. The 3 were on top of the crypt, surrounded by bones and millions of dollars worth of diamonds. The campers knew better than to steal from temples, especially Pluto's. Naruto and Nico were 2 of the only demigods to ever go into Tartarus and survive, Nico because his child of Pluto heritage and Naruto's abilities as a son of Mercury. Between the child of the underworld and the greatest escape artist in camp, they were a good duo. Nico nodded. Yes, but I fear we must delay our search now that Percy is here and the Feast of Fortuna grows near. You know him? Hazel accused. Naruto and Nico looked at each for a moment and Nico cracked a smile. Perseus Jackson, he's an interesting one. Hazel frowned and opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but Nico shook his head. I'm sorry Hazel, but some secrets need to stay secret for now. He's not like me? Hazel asked, not sure of what she wanted the answer to be. Nico shook his head sadly. No, Hazel, he's not like you. Is he dangerous? Hazel asked, confused. Extremely, to his enemies but not to Camp Jupiter, Naruto explained with a smile. He liked the kid, even though he knew what Percy had done to Reina in the past. Nevertheless, when Percy got his memory back, his ass was going to get whooped. Hazel hesitated, unsure, but Naruto places a hand on her shoulder. Don't worry Zelly, you can trust him. Don't call me Zelly, Hazel complained but sighed. Is it true? About death? Is Alcyonius? Hazel asked. Naruto's face darkened. Yes, but I don't think he has the power to stop death by himself. Nico nodded in agreement. He must have a partner, Naruto frowned. I just don't know who it could be. The children of Pluto and Mercury paused. Naruto leaned back and accidentally looked directly into the waning sun. Shit. Look at the time. Hazel's eyes widened as she jumped to her feet and took off toward New Rome. Let's go. I don't want to be sewn into a sack of weasels. To anyone else this would have been an odd statement, but Naruto and Nico knew exactly what she was talking about. They quickly leapt to their feet before running after Hazel, who was sprinting like a centaur was after her. How troublesome, Naruto mumbled under his breath as he reached out, grabbed Nico by the aviator jacket and sped off at a speed faster than the eye can travel, only pausing to grab Hazel with his other hand. The first time Naruto had seen the Legion assemble, he had to admit he was a bit impressed. It was almost shinobi-level war preparation. The first 4 cohorts, each 40 kids strong, stood in rows in front of their barracks on either side of the Via Praetoria. The 5th cohort assembled at the very end, in front of the Principia, since their barracks were tucked in the back corner of camp next to the stables and the latrines. Hazel had to run right down the middle of the Legion to reach her place. The campers were dressed for war. Their polished chainmail gleamed over fresh purple t-shirts and ripped jeans. Even their leather combat boots looked ferocious with their iron cleats, great for marching through mud or stomping on faces. In front of the legionnaires, like a line of giant dominoes, stood their red and gold shields, each the size of a refrigerator door. Every legionnaire carried a harpoon-like spear called a pilum, a gladius, a dagger and about 100 pounds of other equipment. How they managed to carry that much stuff and still fight was something Naruto was confused with to this day. The children of Pluto and Mercury jogged down the street as everyone was coming to attention, so their entrance was really obvious. Naruto and Nico looked at each other before Nico rushed to the side next to Percy Jackson and Naruto ran to the front next to Gwen, leaving Hazel to walk behind Dakota. Reina trotted around on Scipio, her Pegasus, while evaluating the Legion with a calculating gaze. She stared at each and every member, scowling when she saw Naruto's lack of armor. In fact, the only obvious weapons on him was the celestial bronze katana at his waist and the 3-bladed knives strapped to his jeans. Nevertheless, he was the most dangerous man in the room. A ninja that could move faster than sound and create swirling balls of pure energy would trump a human lightning rod or a drunk idiot who drank too much Kool-Aid any day. Octavian stepped forward with a look of self-importance on his face. Standards. The standard bearers stepped forward. They all wore lion-skin capes and held poles decorated with each cohort's emblems. The last to present his standard was Jacob, the Legion's eagle-bearer whose job was to hold a long stick with absolutely nothing on top. Every time the eagle-less pole was lifted, the Legion all seemed shift uncomfortably in embarrassment. Reina stopped and everyone straightened. While Naruto may have been the most dangerous, Reina was the most terrifying. Reina slammed her spear on the floor so hard, Naruto thought he heard a crack. Romans. This morning, 2 Gorgons were swept into the river by this newcomer, Percy Jackson. Juno herself guided him here, and proclaimed him a son of Neptune. Naruto reached forward and clapped a shoulder on Percy's back, launching him forward a step. Everyone looked at him so Percy did an awkward wave. Reina rolled her eyes. He wishes to join the Legion. What do the auguries say? I have read the entrails, Octavian announced, as if he'd kicked down the doors of Mount Ophrys single-handedly rather than dismembering a stuffed panda pillow. The auguries are favorable. He is qualified to serve, Octavian declared, receiving a chorus of "Avenue" from the Legion. Reina motioned the senior officers forward, Naruto and 1 Centurion from each cohort stepping up. Octavian, as the most senior Centurion, turned to Percy with his normal beady-eyed look. Recruit. Do you have credentials? Letters of reference? Octavian asked before wrinkling his nose in disgust when Percy shook his head. No letters. Will any legionnaires stand for him? Octavian said regretfully, as if having to say that was the most disgraceful thing he had ever had to utter. Frank stepped forward. I will. Immediately there were shouts of protest from the other cohorts and Naruto almost face-palmed. Reina raised her hand for quiet and glared at Frank. Frank Zhang, for the second time today, I remind you that you are on probatio. Your godly parent has not even claimed you yet. You're not eligible to stand for another camper until you've earned your first stripe, she said. Frank looked like he would die of embarrassment when Naruto came to his rescue. I'll stand for Percy Jackson, he announced. That shut everyone up. Naruto was a Roman unlike any other. A shinobi from the Mist Continent, he was the greatest warrior in the Legion and had been offered the honor of praetor multiple times in his short tenure here. While the camp may vote Octavian to lead them, the camp knew Reina and Naruto would be the ones who would lead them into battle. Tartarus be damned, Hazel stepped forward, as will I. Reina nodded. Very well. Naruto Uzumaki, Centurion of the 5th cohort, and Hazel Levesque, Legionnaire of the 5th cohort, will stand for Percy Jackson. She turned to the fifth. Does the fifth cohort accept him? Frank pounded his shield against the ground. The other members of the fifth followed his lead, though they didn't seem very excited. Naruto sent Gwen a look causing the girl to sigh before nodding in agreement. My cohort has spoken, we accept the recruit, Gwen said. Reina looked at Percy with pity. Congratulations, Percy Jackson. You stand on probatio. You will be given a tablet with your name and cohort. In 1 year's time, or as soon as you complete an act of valor, you will become a full member of the 12th Legion Fulminata. Serve Rome, obey the rules of the Legion and defend the camp with honor. Senatus Populusque Romanus. The rest of the Legion echoed the cheer. Reina wheeled her Pegasus away from Percy, like she was glad to be done with him. Naruto frowned. He knew that Reina didn't like Percy, but she was way too obvious about it. Centurions, you and your troops have 1 hour for dinner. Then we will meet on the field of Mars. The first and second cohorts will defend. The third, fourth and fifth will attack. Good fortune, Reina announced. Dismissed, she ordered. A bigger cheer went up, for the war games and for dinner. The cohorts broke ranks and ran for the mess hall. Hazel waved at Percy, who made his way through the crowd with Nico and Naruto at his side. To Hazel's surprise, Nico was beaming at her. Naruto was beaming as well, but he was always smiling. Good job, sis. That took guts, standing for him. Nico congratulated. Naruto smiled before looking over at Percy. One of the guards had given Percy his lead probatio nameplate. Percy had strung it on his leather necklace with the strange beads that had different designs on each one. As soon as Naruto saw the beads, he flinched. Luckily, only Nico noticed. Thanks, Hazel, Naruto. What exactly does it mean, standing for me? Percy asked. We guarantee your good behavior. I teach you the rules, answer your questions, make sure you don't disgrace the Legion. Hazel explained with a rolling gesture of her hand as if to say, etc., etc. And, if I do something wrong? Percy asked nervously. Then we get killed along with you. Hungry? Let's eat, Hazel said as she ran to the mess hall with Percy trailing behind. Naruto laughed and ran after his honorary little sister and his friend. Ah, I was blessed with such optimistic friends. Nico rolled his eyes as he watched Naruto, Hazel and Percy race toward the... I'd rather be a pessimist than an optimist. Nevertheless, he laughed and chased after his family with a smile that looked unnatural on his face. If there was one thing Naruto missed about Camp Jupiter, it was the food. Ore whisked food around at high speeds, and seemed to give exactly what everyone wanted. The best part of having super speed is that his brain could process things faster, thus he could catch all those cute redheads in action. What? It was a Namikaze thing. Go ask Mercury or something. Naruto sat next to Nico and across from Hazel, who was sitting next to Percy and Frank. Everyone had received a different meal. Hazel got shrimp jumbo. Frank got some beef stir-fry. Nico a big slice of lasagna and Percy a burger and a blue Coke. Hey Naruto, where's your food? Percy asked, looking at the empty spot before Naruto. Naruto looked around at the swirling hurricane before sticking out his hand, catching a bowl. A pretty girl with elfin features and a white silk dress appeared as Naruto had caught her hand. He lifted her hand and brought it to his mouth, planting a small kiss, thanks sweetheart. The elfin girl blushes before handing Naruto the bowl and disappearing in a gust of wind. Hazel rolled her eyes. You're such a shameless flirt. Hey, what guy doesn't want to date a cute girl who can cook? Naruto pointed out as he pulled out a pair of chopsticks. You have a girlfriend that's pretty and can cook, Hazel deadpanned with a scowl. Naruto grinned like a fox. Touché. Besides the point, you'll be surprised what you learn from Apollo and Mercury after a night on the town, Naruto commented as he broke his chopsticks with a snap before diving into his bowl with fervor, avoiding Nico's glare at almost revealing something very important and very sensitive. What is that? Percy asked, gesturing toward Naruto's bowl with his ketchup-covered fry. Naruto's head whipped around so fast, it hurt to watch. Blasphemy. You do not know what ramen-chan is? It's the food of the gods. That's ambrosia, Hazel deadpanned. She had heard Naruto's rant many times and it was just as annoying every time. Sacrilege. Naruto yelled and stood up, almost knocking over the table with his sudden movement. Nico rolled his eyes as he ate a piece of ground beef from his plate. You're so full of it. Suck it, shorty, Naruto said, dismissing Nico's comment. The emo teen frowned before he stood up, revealing he was at Naruto's shoulder. You want to go, blondie? But before the two best friends could come to blows, Don the Fawn ran over, his afro and rainbow-tinted glasses jiggling with each step. Hey Hazel, dudes. Hazel gave a half-hearted wave so Don moved on to Percy. Hey newbie, you going to eat that? Percy raised an eyebrow. I thought fawns were vegetarian? Don shook his head like the thought was crazy to him. Not the murdered cow, the plate. Percy was about to respond when Don leaned in and sniffed him. Hey, what's that? A look of shock crossed Don's face. Hey, you've got an empathy link with a fawn. Nico stood up instantly, grabbing Don by the wrist before reaching behind the couch to grab an odd purple ghost in a toga. Know what? Don, Vitellius and I should go to the Praetor's table. Discuss strategies for the war games. The lair that had appeared from the couch looked at the son of Pluto with confusion. But go on, Vitellius, I'm sure Reina would love to hear your ideas, Naruto encouraged with a forced smile on his face. Vitellius nodded before following Nico while Don seemed to skip toward the large table where Reina sat. Once Reina noticed the three walking toward her, she frowned and sent a look at Naruto. If looks could kill, Naruto would have been a smoldering pile of dust on the floor. She's going to kill me, Naruto mumbled under his breath before casting his gaze toward Percy again. So Perseus. Percy looked up from his burger. Yes? Naruto folded his hands before him, an empty bowl of ramen in front of him. Percy prepared for a long and carefully thought-out question that would be carefully tailored to get as much information from his as possible. What's your type? Naruto asked with a big grin. Hazel facepalmed. Nico rolled his eyes. Frank blushed heavily and cast a gaze at Hazel. Percy almost face-faulted. What? Because I know a cute brunette in the third cohort, Naruto began only for Percy to shake his head. Blonde and gray eyes, he mumbled, missing Nico's minor flinch. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise before frowning. Blonde and gray eyes, I'll get back to you on that. Naruto pulled out his Swiss Army knife and began to play with the many blades and other tools on the weapon off-mindedly while the rest of the group just stared at him oddly. After a moment, Naruto caught on. What? Percy gestured at Naruto's weapon with his almost finished burger. Your sword is cool. Naruto smiled, but nostalgia and a hint of sadness could be seen on his face. Yeah, it was a gift from my dad. Naruto then looked down toward his sandals. So are the shoes, friction-proof and shock-absorbing. So you know, I don't catch my feet on fire or something. What's your sword called? Percy asked. Now Hazel, Frank and Nico were paying attention. Naruto never told them much around his weapon and style besides the fact that they were Japanese and given to him by his father. Naruto hesitated before sighing. Cellarior, instantly the Latin clicked into Percy's head. Faster? Really? You named your sword Riptide, and you're a son of Neptune. You want to talk about cliché? Naruto deadpanned. Percy chuckled. Touché, Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. I'm the first of my father's kids to ever be born with his speed, so that along with Cellarior makes me pretty dangerous. How fast can you run? Percy asked between a big bite of his blue burger and a sip of blue Coke. Naruto was about to answer when he froze. I have no idea, Naruto said with a shocked look on his face. Pretty fast. Everyone at the table wanted to facepalm. Champion of series? Yeah. It was a gift from the goddess herself last year. I helped save Kansas last year from a fire-breathing Drakon, and Ceres was so happy her crops were saved that she named me her champion. Naruto said with a grin. It does make me more powerful though, as it allows me to absorb Senjutsu chakra faster. Nico and Frank shivered. They had both spared with Naruto while he was in Super Sage mode, as Frank called it, and it was terrifying. Frank was still waiting for the bruise to heal. Naruto shrugged. The styles I use are called Batojutsu and Iijutsu. They're made so I can draw my sword faster than any swordsman can swing. He smirked. Roman or Greek? Percy's eye twitched at the challenge. Before their conversation could continue, there was the sound of a loud horn and the entire legion began to get up from their seats, excitement rippling through the camp. Naruto turned to face Percy with his signature foxy grin. So I have a question, Aqualad. Before Percy could answer, Naruto slammed his three-bladed dagger onto the table, stabbing it an inch from Frank's hand. Are you ready to kick some ass? Always, Percy said with a grin almost as big as Naruto. It was time to show some Romans how Greeks fought. Review por favor. Tria I don't own Percy Jackson and the Olympians, heroes of Olympus or Naruto. They are all the property of their respective owners. Son of the Traveler and Sage of Rome, son of Neptune. Chapter 3. Ah, what a beautiful day to come back to life. They did a good job today, that's bad for us, Hazel mumbled as they reached the field of Mars. It was a huge field of short grass that was the setting of most of Camp Jupiter's complementary activities like Deathball, Tag and Naruto's personal favorite, the War Games, although he did like the Colosseum battles as they reminded him of the third stage of the Chunin exams. Sitting at the other end of the field was a fortress the size of Hokage Tower made of stone with huge iron portcullis, gigantic guard towers, deadly scorpion ballistae and water cannons galore. It was an interesting sight for everyone except for the shinobi son of Mercury. Nothing a good Odama Rasenshuriken, Big Ball Rasenshuriken, wouldn't destroy. Reina said no Rasenshurikens in camp, Hazel scolded. Reina had a very strict set of rules for Naruto after he showed her the power a Rasenshuriken and some of his other techniques could do. Needless to say, there was now a part of the field of Mars that was missing a huge chunk of land. Not to mention instantaneous Senin Modo, Sage Mode, and being able to go several times faster than the speed of sound. It was the Flash met Superman and they had an Asian love child. Yeah, sorry for the weird image. But Zelly-chan, Naruto began to complain but stopped when he saw the tiny girl place her hands on her hips. No, Hazel said using a tone that meant, this is final. Naruto may be the fastest human alive and champion of one of the 6 eldest Olympians, but Hazel was still terrifying. This was coming from the teen that fought a man who could control gravity, turn his body into weapons, summon animals, absorb chakra, remove souls and summon the freaking king of hell. Stupid overpowered eyes, Percy looked between the two in confusion. What are you talking about? Naruto sighed. I'm actually from a place called the Mist Continent, which is a giant island hidden by so much magical mist that the mortal world doesn't know it exists. Over time, the people of my world discovered that we can control our life force to do incredible things. Percy raised an eyebrow. This sounded very Dragon Ball Z-like. Like what? Naruto sighed and placed a hand out. Almost instantly a ball of blue swirling energy formed in Naruto's hand. It was elegant, a perfect sphere that made only a slight hum, but on the inside, it was chaotic, swirling like hurricane that would destroy anything in its path. Like that? Naruto said with a big grin. Percy's jaw was almost unhinged from his head, which was quite a funny sight, Naruto had to admit. It's called the Rasengan and it's an A-rank technique created by my dad. It took his stupid godly ass 3 years to make it but was finally able to make a jutsu that didn't need hand seals, Naruto explained. Percy, Hazel and Frank looked around to see if lightning would strike their blonde-haired friend, but nothing happened. Naruto and her Mercury had an odd relationship. They were a lot closer than most gods and their children, to the point they sometimes went out drinking with Apollo and Mars. On the other hand, Naruto would never forgive his father for leaving him in Konoha alone and never telling him of his heritage. How powerful is it? Percy asked. The Rasengan, strong enough to vaporize a hellhound on contact, Naruto said with a grin. When Percy heard this, he almost tripped over the rock in front of him in surprise. Are you sure you're not from Dragon Ball Z? Naruto ignored the question as he watched the first cohort enter the fort. I don't know why Rei won't let me use the Rasenshuriken. It can destroy that fort in one blow. Hazel deadpanned. Naruto raised an eyebrow. So? Hazel facepalmed. And everyone in it. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Oh yeah, that's why. So the fort is manned by the first and second cohorts, and the third, fourth and fifth are trying to break in and steal the banners while defending our own. We're supposed to work together, but in the end, it's every cohort for themselves. Hazel explained to Percy. So we're supposed to get in, take the banners and get out? It's like capture the flag, Percy said. Just more dangerous, Frank pointed out. Percy chuckled as he spun Riptide in his hands, its celestial bronze blade making an arc in the air with every revolution. Oh, you've never played capture the flag with me. Frank flinched when he saw Riptide. Percy arched a brow. We can use real weapons, right? Yeah, it's just I've never seen anyone besides Naruto use a celestial bronze weapon, Frank admitted. The thing Frank was actually thinking about was if Naruto was given his weapons from his father, a god, then Percy probably got his weapon directly from his father as well. I wonder what's it like to know who your father is, Frank mused to himself sadly as he checked Percy's leather armor. To Frank's surprise, every strap and buckle was correct. Wow, it's perfect. Percy shot a glance over to his blonde friend who was strapping Centurion to his jeans. What about you, Naruto? No armor? Naruto shook his head as he readjusted his jacket. I don't usually get hit, but even then, the clothes are reinforced. Percy looked around at the other cohorts. The first cohort was putting on their shining imperial gold helmets, their sparkling iron cleats and their clean leather armor. They would have looked terrifying if the one leading them wasn't a pale blonde with the voice of a banshee and a bunch of teddy bears around his waist. The second cohort was almost as nice in terms of equipment and were certainly more scary than the first due to the fact that they were led by James, son of Mars, and a teen with enough muscle to make Arnold Schwarzenegger think twice. The third and fourth were mostly filled with legacies of Ceres, Vulcan, Venus and other gods who weren't directly combat-oriented, however their parents had sent in letters so they weren't placed in the final cohort. Finally, there was the fifth. The members were all wearing dirty leather armor, shields whose paint was coming off, and imperial gold weapons that had enough chips to look like Samahata. All the members looked at the field with down faces, like they could see their defeat in the future and they just wanted to get it over with. Gwen, the tiny redhead girl in the front, was jumping around and giving thumbs up and encouraging pep talks in an attempt to cheer up her cohort, but was beginning to discover her efforts were fruitless. Something tells me the fifth isn't considered the best, Percy deduced. Yeah, Frank answered with a sigh. Naruto placed a hand to his chin in thought. Which is interesting since Reina, Jason and I all come from the fifth, and now that you guys are here, we're even stronger. Hazel rolled her eyes. So we're most likely going to be thrown against the wall first to weaken the defenses. Percy then remembered something. Wait, Naruto, aren't you supposed to be with Gwen talking to the Centurions of the third and fourth? Naruto waved him off as he picked at Celerior's hilt. I let her be the diplomatic one. Translation. He's too lazy, Hazel said with a pout. Naruto grinned like a fox. Gwen walked up to the group. So good news, guys, we're gonna be thrown up against the walls to soften the defense. The entire cohort groaned. Gwen sighed. I know, but maybe this time we'll be blessed by Fortuna. She then put on her game face, which looked weird on her but still serious. Line 1, you're with me. Turtle formation to the walls and try to draw their fire. Line 2 will take Hannibal and the scaling ladders to the western wall. If line 1 can distract them, then you may be able to get over the wall in time. She turned to the group on the side. Hazel and Frank, try to keep Percy alive. I'm here too, Naruto added. Frank let out a small breath of relief. Naruto was eccentric in the least, but he was strong and would keep them alive. Hopefully. Naruto rubbed his hands together with a foxy grin on his face. What's the plan? I don't know, Percy said with a shrug. The four of them sat for a second when Frank's eyes widened. Wait, I have an idea. Naruto facepalmed. We're gonna die. I take back everything I've ever said about any of your plans. The four Romans were crawling through a small tunnel that Hazel had found. It was a daughter of Pluto thing. You know, daughter of the one who ruled all under the earth. The only lights in the dark path under the earth was the lights of Riptide and Celerior, the celestial bronze weapons casting a dull glow. Frank pouted. Wait, what do you say about my plans? Naruto clapped an arm around Frank's shoulder. I just told you, Frankie, nothing anymore. Hazel rolled her eyes. We're 10 feet from the wall. Naruto nodded. Gotcha. Percy said with a grin. Let's shake this game up a bit, Naruto snickered. Nice pun. Percy raised an eyebrow. What, shake it up? Neptune? Earthshaker? Naruto said with another chuckle. Frank, Percy and Hazel facepalmed. Hazel pointed up at an opening she formed. Go. Naruto slapped Frank on the back, urging him toward the hole. Frankie, it was your plan. You go first, then Hazel, then Percy. I'll draw the attention away from Gwen, then I'll meet you up. Frank hesitated before nodding, climbing out of the tunnel and into the chaos. Hazel gave Naruto a hug. "Stay safe." Naruto nodded and gave her a thumbs up. "You too." Hazel nodded and walked out, Percy behind her. Naruto waited for a second before jumping out, his hands already in his favorite hand sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Instantly, a clone of Naruto sprouted into existence next to him. Naruto prepared to form his most powerful technique when he remembered something. Reina said no Rasen Shuriken. He sighed. "Don't want to anger my Tsunere girlfriend." He looked around to find the fifth being pummeled by the other cohorts, Gwen desperately trying to keep the turtle formation together. In his hand sprouted a spinning ball of blue energy, 4 tiny wind blades sticking out of the side. Senpo. Futon Rasengan. Sage Art. Wind Release Rasengan. His clone formed a tiger seal. Senpo. Kaden Gokakyu no Jutsu. Sage Art. Fire Release Great Fireball Jutsu. He threw the Futon Rasengan, allowing it to intercept the fireball that was shot from the clone's mouth. The two attacks combined into a raging tornado of flame that shot straight at the cohorts attacking the fifth, forcing them to jump out of the way. He had decided to take up the Kaden nature last year as a tribute to Ero Sennin. It was difficult to say the least as he had no teacher to learn from, but he had managed to replicate some of the techniques he had seen Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke Teme and Ero Sennin. "Hey idiots! Lay off my cohort," he roared at the top of his lungs. All of the cohorts looked at Naruto and had a simultaneous look of, "Oh no." Naruto disappeared in a burst of speed, only to reappear in a senjutsu-charged sidekick to a fourth cohort member's shield. Dynamic entry. The Roman was sent flying, straight into a bunch of second cohort members like a bowling ball to a bunch of pins. Naruto disappeared again, reappearing behind a group of Romans who quickly crumpled under his blows. A knee to the ribs, a punch to the solar plexus, a roundhouse kick to the face. All were perfect. "Charge! Johnny!" one of the Centurions yelled. The remaining Romans turned away from the fifth and ran at Naruto, who just waited, hand on Celerior's handle. Once they were close enough, he was gone with a trail of flame behind him. Streaks of bronze light danced through the tight formation of the trained and armored Romans. Then suddenly, Naruto reappeared, and with the skill of a master, Celerior was slid back into his sheath. Like a stack of dominoes, the rest of the attackers fell to the hard ground of the field of Mars. Naruto ran up to Gwen, who watched this all with awe. "Are you guys okay?" "Yeah, we're fine. Go," she said before pointing at the wall. "Okay, stay safe," Naruto yelled before he disappeared again, running straight up the wall. Gwen raised her imperial gold into the air. "Fifth, we march." There was a roar of agreement this time. When Naruto got to the top of the wall, it was pure carnage. Frank was knocking over defenders left and right while Hazel was using the length of her spatha to attack people from atop Hannibal. The biggest problem for the first and second was Percy. He was fighting like a Greek, slicing, diving, kicking, deflecting, disarming. No one could stop him. Naruto appeared next to his friend and drew Celerior to block the blade about to catch Percy in the ribs. "Hey Percy." Percy's eyes widened in surprise before he kicked the Roman in front of him in the chest, sending him into a pile of his friends. "Yo." Naruto disappeared again only to reappear behind a group of second cohort members, Celerior out. He quickly sheathed his blade, and once it clicked, all of the Romans' armor and pants fell. In that instant, he had cut through all of the straps holding their armor and their belts holding their pants. It was not a good day for some of them to be wearing SpongeBob briefs. Percy chuckled at the girly screams from the Romans while averting his eyes from some of the girls. He ducked under a gladius swing and smashed his pommel into the dude's leather armor. The flat of his blade came up and across the gold helmet, knocking him unconscious. Naruto absorbed some nature chakra before leaping into the air. Before landing with Celerior's blade in the ground. Doriasan, Earth Dragon Flash. The wall erupted from the force, shooting chunks of earth as big as boulders into the attackers. Down a majority of the defending force between the force of the boulders or the giant hole in the floor. "Percy." Frank ordered, and the son of Neptune nodded. He shot a hand out and focused, a bead of sweat running down his face while Naruto rushed to protect his friend. A few seconds later, the water cannons exploded and showered everything in an explosion of water and metal. Naruto slid under a sword thrust and struck at the back of his opponent's knee with Celerior's pommel. Pulling himself into a windmill, he struck another two first cohort members in the leather armor. He dives forever into a front roll, slicing at legs with his katana. Octavian's eyes widened in anger. Stop them! Naruto placed both hands on the floor and pushed himself into a handstand, kicking someone in the chin. I got the idiot, he yelled to Percy, who nodded. Naruto ran before performing a full Arabian over all of Octavian's guards and landing behind the scrawny boy. He clasped his forefingers and middle fingers together before coating them with chakra. Time for my ultimate move. Konohagakure Hiden Taijutsu Ogi. Senin Garashi. Konohagakure Secret Taijutsu Technique. 1000 Years of Death. Naruto yelled before stabbing Octavian's right where the sun doesn't shine. With the speed of an arrow, Octavian flew through the air while holding his bum and crying hysterically. Ah, I've been defiled. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Geez, he makes it sound like we don't know he's explored that place by himself. Nico facepalmed and turned to Reina. Your boyfriend's an idiot, crude but effective, Reina said with a hand on her chin in thought. If Nico didn't know better, he would have thought that Scipio rolled her eyes. The Romans in the first cohort stared in shock for a moment at their leader's violation before turning to Naruto while being careful to face him directly. It was a new rule of Camp Jupiter, never turn your back from Naruto Uzumaki or you may experience constipation. Naruto smirked. I would love to stay and chat but I've gotta run. He disappeared in a burst of speed close to the speed of sound only to reappear in the inner keep where Hazel was destroying everyone from atop Hannibal. He grabbed the banners before throwing them as hard as he could, allowing Hazel to grab them from atop the elephant. Go, he ordered. She nodded before turning around and bursting through the wall with her Kevlar-enforced elephant. Naruto never thought he would say that. He leapt onto Hannibal while searching for his other two teammates. His eyes quickly found them among the chaos, watching as they quickly destroyed the last of the defenders with their strength while the rest of the fifth caught up. Let's go! Naruto shouted. Percy and Frank nodded and ran to climb on. Onwards they rode to victory, the banners displayed high and the rest of the fifth around them like a guard. Finally, they crossed over the boundary line and there was a roar from the once melancholy cohort. Reina swooped by on Scipio and clapped slowly, congratulations. The entire camp began to recondense as the game was over, allowing Naruto to laugh at the damage. Ruined hair, pants that were falling, kick-me signs, orange paint and other pranks were all the results of the many traps Naruto had set up just in case people came after his cohort. Everyone was celebrating till they noticed they were missing one person, a short redhead. Gwen! Frank yelled. He rushed up to the girl as she laid on the floor, a 7-foot pilum sticking out of her chest. The medics surrounded her, attempting to use every piece of medical equipment they could to save her. Naruto cursed. He wished he had Bachan's medical prowess. After a minute the medic shook his head and stood up. Reina surveyed the campers from her Pegasus. There will be an investigation. Honorable death is one thing, but this is different. Naruto knew exactly what she meant. The marks engraved in the wooden shaft of the pilum. CHTI Legio 12F. The weapon belonged to the first cohort and the point was sticking out the front of her armor, meaning Shish had been stabbed from behind. Naruto looked around, scanning each member of the first before landing on Octavian, who was missing his pilum. In an instant, he was in front of the slimy legacy of Apollo and was lifting him from his grip on his neck. His cold blue eyes radiated killing intent. Where is your pilum, you piece of shit? Octavian grabbed for the constricting hands around his throat, but they were too strong. It would be so easy to make a fist, to snap this asshole's neck like a twee. Gwen gasped. Everyone stepped back. Gwen opened her eyes. The color came back to her face. What is it? She blinked. What's everyone staring at? She didn't seem to notice the 7-foot spear sticking out through her chest. Behind Frank, a medic's eyes widened. There's no way. She was dead. She has to be dead. Naruto dropped Octavian like a sack of potatoes and rushed to his fellow Centurion's side. Gwen's breathing was heavy but she was alive. There was a river, and a man asking for payment? I turned around and the exit door was wide open. So I just left. I don't understand. What's happened? Naruto turned to Frank, who nodded. Gwen-chan, don't move. Gwen looked confused but nodded. Naruto went behind her and pushed the spear slowly out, Frank pulling from the front until the spear was out. It was slick with her blood, but Gwen didn't seem to notice. The blood quickly stopped before the wound started to heal, similar to Naruto's Wolverine-like healing factor. Percy grabbed one side while Frank grabbed the other. Reina whipped around to Nico and Naruto and gave them a glare. Is this some kind of trick? A power of Pluto perhaps? She questioned with a stern glare. Naruto and Nico shook their heads. No, Pluto doesn't let people return. A thunderous voice rolled across the field. Death loses its hold. This is only the beginning. Campers drew weapons. Hannibal trumpeted nervously. Scipio reared, almost throwing Reina were it not for Naruto's hand behind her waist. I know that voice, Percy said. He didn't sound pleased. In the midst of the legion, a column of fire blasted into the air. Campers who had been soaked by the cannons found their clothes instantly steam-dried. Everyone scrambled backwards as a huge soldier stepped out of the explosion. The soldier was 10 feet tall, dressed in Canadian Forces desert camouflage. His black hair was cut in a flat-topped wedge like Frank's. His face was angular and brutal, marked with old knife scars. He wore a utility belt with a pistol, a knife holster and several grenades. In his hands was an oversized M16 rifle. As everyone else stepped back, Frank stepped forward. Naruto cast a look at his friend before nodding. It was about time. Frank took a few more steps forward before kneeling, the rest of the camp following his lead. Naruto hated kneeling, but he knew that Reina would get mad at him and make him sleep on the couch for the week if he didn't. Naruto then noticed that Percy was not next to him and was instead standing up, glaring at the war god. You're Ares, Percy said with a frown on his face. What do you want? A collective gasp went up from 200 campers and an elephant. Naruto facepalmed. Reina wanted to gut him with a knife. Hazel wanted to hide in her armor. Frank looked at Percy like her was insane. Instead of blasting Percy to Mars, ha puns. The god bared his brilliant white teeth. You've got spunk, kid, he said. Ares is my Greek form. But to these followers, to the children of Rome, I am Mars, patron of the Empire, divine father of Romulus and Remus. We've met, Percy said, uncertainty written on his face. We had a fight. Naruto and Nico shared a glance. Mars chuckled. I fight a lot of people, but I assure you, you've never fought me as Mars. If you had, you'd be dead. Now, kneel, as befits a child of Rome, before you try my patience. Percy, Frank pleaded. Percy clearly didn't like it, but he knelt. Romans, lend me your ears. Mars snickered. I've always wanted to say that. Naruto chuckled. He could share a drink with this guy. I come from Olympus with a message. Jupiter doesn't like us communicating directly with mortals, especially nowadays, but he has allowed this exception, as you Romans have always been my special people. I'm only permitted to speak for a few minutes, so listen up. Mars announced in a booming voice. He pointed at Gwen. This one should be dead, yet she's not. The monsters you fight no longer return to Tartarus when they are slain. Some mortals who died long ago are now walking the earth again. Thanatos has been chained, Mars declared. The doors of death have been forced open, and no one is policing them. At least, not impartially. Gaia allows our enemies to pour forth into the world of mortals. Her sons the giants are mustering armies against you. Armies that you will not be able to kill. Unless death is unleashed to return to his duties, you will be overrun. You must find Thanatos and free him from the giants. Only he can reverse the tide. Mars looked around and noticed that everyone was still silently kneeling, a few ready to wet themselves. Oh, you can get up now. Any questions? Reina rose uneasily and approached the god, followed by Naruto who had a big grin and Octavian who was bowing like an Olympic ass-kisser. Lord Mars, Reina said carefully. We are honored. Beyond honored, said Octavian. So far beyond honored. Naruto slapped Octavian on the back of his head so hard he was slammed to ground, his face bouncing when it hit the grass of the field of Mars. Mars smirked and held out a fist to Naruto who grinned and bumped it. Well, Reina said, holding back her need to roll her eyes at the buddy bro god Mance. Thanatos is the god of death, the lieutenant of Pluto? Right. And you're saying that he's been captured by giants, right? And therefore people will stop dying? Reina asked with an arched brow. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He had bad experiences with reincarnated bodies, and if this was anything like the last time, he wasn't waiting 5 seconds. Not all at once, Mars said. But the barriers between life and death will continue to weaken. Those who know how to take advantage of this will exploit it. Monsters are already harder to dispatch and respawn in minutes. Soon they will be completely impossible to kill. Some demigods will also be able to find their way back from the underworld. Like your friend Centurion Shish Kebab. Gwen winced. Centurion Shish Kebab. If left unstopped, Mars continued, even mortals will eventually find it impossible to die. Can you imagine a world in which no one dies, ever? Octavian raised his hand feebly. But, mighty all-powerful Lord Mars, if we can't die, isn't that a good thing? If we can stay alive. Indefinitely. Don't be foolish, boy. Mars bellowed. Endless slaughter with no conclusion. Carnage without any point? Enemies that rise again and can never be killed? Is that what you want? You're the god of war, Percy spoke up. Don't you want endless carnage? Naruto shrugged. It was a fair point. Mars's infrared goggles glowed brighter, like a red sun ready to engulf everything in its heat. Idiotic. Perhaps I have fought you before. I can understand why I'd want to kill you. I'm the god of Rome, child. I am the god of military might used for a righteous cause. I protect the legions. I am happy to crush my enemies underfoot, but I don't fight without reason. I don't want war without end. You will discover this. You will serve me. Not likely, Percy said. Naruto smirked. Not many others had the balls to backtalk a god. Frank waited for the war god to strike him down, but Mars just grinned like they were two old buddies talking trash. I order a quest. The god announced. All eyes were on him, so he continued. You will go north and find Thanatos in the land beyond the gods. You will free him and thwart the plans of the giants. Beware Gaia. Beware her son, the eldest. Giant. Next to Frank, Hazel made a squeaking sound. The land beyond the gods? Mars stared down at her, his grip tightening on his M16. That's right, Hazel Levesque. You know what I mean. Everyone here remembers the land where the Legion lost its honor. Perhaps if the quest succeeds, and you return by the Feast of Fortuna, perhaps then your honor will be restored. If you don't succeed, there won't be any camp left to return to. Rome will be overrun, its legacy lost forever. So my advice is, don't fail. Octavian somehow managed to bow even lower. Lord Mars, just one tiny thing. A quest requires a prophecy, a mystical poem to guide us. We used to get them from the Sibylline books, but now it's up to the augur to glean the will of gods. So if I could just run and get about 70 stuffed animals and possibly a knife. You're the augur? The god interrupted, bored of the scrawny boy's rambling. Why yes, my lord. Naruto coughed into his hand, but it sounded suspiciously like, submissive much? Mars chuckled. He pulled a scroll from his utility belt. Anyone got a pen? The legionnaires just stared at him like he had flown from Venus. Mars sighed. 200 Romans, and no one's got a pen. Never mind. He slung his M16 onto his back and pulled out a hand grenade. There were many screaming Romans, and from the smell, a few may have wet their leather armor. Then the grenade morphed into a ballpoint pen and Mars began to write in red ink. Naruto and Frank looked at Percy with wide eyes. The Canadian mouthed to the son of Poseidon. Can your sword do grenade form? Percy mouthed back with a frown. No, shut up. There, Mars muttered as he finished writing and threw the scroll at Octavian. A prophecy. You can add it to your books, engrave it on your floor, whatever. Octavian read the scroll with a raised eyebrow. This says, go to Alaska. Find Thanatos and free him. Come back by sundown on June 24th or die. Yes. Mars said. Is that not clear? Well, my lord, usually prophecies are unclear. They're wrapped in riddles. They rhyme, and, Octavian mumbled. Naruto groaned. He hated politicians. They never know when to shut up. Mars casually popped another grenade off his belt. Yes? The prophecy is clear. Octavian announced to the Legion, a quest. Good answer. Mars tapped the grenade to his chin in thought. Now, what else? There was something else. Oh, yes. He turned to Frank. Come here, kid. Frank looked scared, but he did as the war god asked. Mars grinned. Nice job taking the wall, kid. Who's the ref for this game? Reyna raised her hand. You see that play, ref? Mars demanded. That was my kid. First over the wall, won the game for his team. Unless you're blind, that was an MVP play. You're not blind, are you? Reyna looked like she was trying to swallow a, never mind. Naruto giggled pervertedly. No, Lord Mars. She said with a shake of head. Then make sure he gets the mural crown, Mars demanded. My kid, here, he yelled at the Legion, in case anyone this side of the Prime Meridian hadn't heard. Emily Zhang's son, Mars continued. She was a good soldier. Good woman. This kid Frank proved his stuff tonight. Happy late birthday, kid. Time you stepped up to a real man's weapon. He tossed Frank his M16. For a split second Naruto thought his poor Chinese friend would be crushed under the weight of the massive assault rifle, but the gun suddenly changed in midair, becoming smaller and thinner. By the time Frank caught it, the weapon was a spear. It had a shaft of imperial gold and a strange point like a white bone. The tip is a dragon's tooth, Mars explained. You haven't learned to use your mom's talents yet, have you? Well, that spear will give you some breathing room until you do. You get 3 charges out of it, so use it wisely. Talents? Naruto thought as he roamed his memories for any gifts in Greco-Roman mythology that could apply to Frank. Now, my kid Frank Zhang is gonna lead the quest to free Thanatos, unless there are any objections, Mars said, although there was a hidden challenge, as if he was tempting anyone to try. Of course, no one said a word. But many of the campers glared at Frank with envy, jealousy, anger, bitterness. The gods were often conceited and sometimes never claimed their kids at all. Sometimes this was worse than not knowing. Knowing your parent was there and didn't care enough to claim you as their own. You can take 3 companions, Mars explained. This quest is important enough to bend the rules slightly. One of them needs to be this kid. He pointed at Percy, who frowned. He's gonna learn some respect for Mars on this trip, or die trying. He then pointed at Naruto. I would take that kid too. Mercury speaks highly of him. Naruto grinned but didn't miss the looks of envy from the campers. Not many demigods get talked about between gods. As for the third, I don't care. Mars shrugged. Pick whomever you want. Have one of your Senate debates. You all are good at those. The god's image flickered for a second, like static before solidifying. Lightning crackled across the sky. That's my cue, Mars said with a sigh. He turned to the Romans, who were still staring in shock and confusion. Until next time, Romans. Do not disappoint me. The god erupted in flames, and then he was gone. Reyna turned towards Frank. Her expression was part amazement, part nausea, like she'd finally managed to get that phallic object down her throat. She raised her arm in a Roman salute. Avenue, Frank Zhang, son of Mars. The whole legion followed her lead, but Frank looked like he was about to fall to his knees and cry to the heavens. Or go to a One Direction concert. Both were worthy of crying to the heavens. Naruto clapped a hand on Frank's shoulder. Don't you love risking your life to go on a quest to a land beyond the gods? It gives you such a thrill? Hey guys. Chapter 3. This story is my greatest Naruto crossover yet. So I would like to address a few things, so this note might be longer than usual. Please stay and listen to what I have to say about the story. First, Naruto will not get Mokuton. Series champion means he is able to use Sage mode easier. That's it, for now. MWAHAHAHAHA second, I've managed to pump out these chapters fast because I've been in the zone. I will not rush the chapters as I intend to write quality chapters. My goal is to be able to write stories that people can enjoy and reread one day, like I know I do with my favorite writers. So if I don't upload every week or so, don't worry. I'm trying to make this story good and my other active stories. Lastly, this may sound petty and some of you will roll your eyes, but please review. Reviews are what fuel the writers of this website. Hearing what you guys say and think after you've slaved over a keyboard trying to finish a chapter, it's one of the best feelings. So just drop a review, say something you liked, thought, or think I should change. I like to hear from you guys. Just no flames, please. Okay, thanks for my long AN. I'll see you guys next chapter. Adios. Review please. Taser I don't own Percy Jackson and the Olympians, heroes of Olympus or Naruto. They are all the property of their respective owners. Son of the Traveler and Sage of Rome, son of Neptune. Chapter 4. A Senate meeting is an hour of Octavian bitching. Naruto grabbed Reina by the wrist and led her away from her conversation with Dakota. Naruto sent him a look and the Kool-Aid-obsessed demigod nodded in understanding before walking back to the fifth. Naruto wrapped an arm around Reina's waist, allowing her to rest her head on his shoulder. Her tanned face was filled with confusion and frustration. She had just had a conversation with Percy Jackson and she had to do damage control for both godly visits. Not to mention holding back Aurum and Argentum for ripping out Octavian's throat, not matter how much she wanted to let them. It's reasons like that I'm glad I didn't become Praetor, Naruto commented. If I knew I had to deal with idiots, gods and other surprises every day, I wouldn't have become Praetor either, Reina said with a sigh. Naruto stopped walking and looked her directly in the eyes. Don't say that, you're the best person for the job. No one can run New Rome like you can and I can imagine anyone else doing it. Reina rolled her eyes and rested her head back on her pillow. You say that because you don't have to do that. Naruto smiled and brushed some hair out of her face as he led her to her Praetor cabin. Every time someone looked at them, they immediately looked away after a pointed look from Naruto. It's okay, Rei-chan, Naruto said with an understanding smile. The Praetor cabin was large but still smaller than the barracks for the cohorts since it was only meant for 2, 3 depending if Naruto was staying over, people. It was on one of the many small hills of New Rome and was built so the setting sun always passed in front of it, basking the white walls of beautiful orange and purple every night. Naruto placed a hand on the doorknob, unlocking it without even thinking about it. It was a Mercury ability that allowed Naruto to unlock any lock he needed to with a thought. Who needed a sonic screwdriver when you had a telekinetic lock-picking ability? Naruto led his girlfriend inside and immediately disappeared, reappearing in an instant with a few of Reina's favorite things. Netflix and cuddling? Naruto asked, a grin on his face. I'll cook. She grabbed her favorite sweatpants from his hands and leaned in, giving him a light kiss. I love you. I love you too, he said with a smile on his face. He looked deep into her obsidian eyes and immediately saw past the tough girl persona she had been forced to adopt as Praetor. She was an officer, a leader, and life was always hard for the ones who had to make the hard decisions. He knew she couldn't return his loving glances or the small kisses he blew her every now and then. It was her job to stay objective, to hold back as much of her emotions as much as possible. He disappeared again, a pound of macaroni already set to boil while he began to make a roux for the sauce. Reina rolled her eyes at the display of his powers. She reached out and grabbed the bottom of the gray couch that she and Naruto had bought last year in New Rome. The couch pulled out without an issue, a product of the dozens of times the couple had done this exact same kind of night. Naruto walked over and handed the Puerto Rican girl a bowl of baked macaroni and cheese with white cheddar, a favorite of Reina's. How Naruto managed to cook and bake a dish in 2 minutes, Reina would never understand. Hey, make some room for me, Naruto said with a laugh as he climbed in next to girlfriend, giving a light push so she would move over. Reina frowned before sliding over just enough from Naruto to get in. Really? You're the small one but you take up the entire bed? Naruto said with a frown. Reina rolled her eyes. Do you want me to go upstairs and leave you on the couch? Naruto flinched. He hated the couch. He slid into his allotted space, cursed his little tsundere girlfriend, and grabbed the remote, turning it on and signing into his Netflix account. Reina began to point at the stuff she wanted to see while Naruto shrugged, digging into his bowl of food. For the rest of the night, neither talked about Naruto's quest or Reina's responsibilities. For the rest of the night, the only thing they complained about was the Wi-Fi being spotty. For the rest of the night, they watched the entire 3rd season of Friends, and laughed until they both fell asleep in each other's arms. For the rest of the night, they were free. Naruto woke up the next day with a groan. Apollo had deemed it was necessary to burn his eyes with the sun's light at an ungodly hour. Naruto knew who wasn't going to have a wingman next time they had a guy's night out. Naruto rolled over to Reina and planted a kiss on the dark-haired beauty's lips, the pull-out bed creaking loudly with every microscopic movement. 10 more minutes fishcake. Reina whined before falling back asleep on the pillow she had made out of Naruto's Camp Jupiter shirt. Naruto frowned. He never should have told her what the other meaning of his name was. Deciding to pull out the big guns, he leaned over and whispered into her ear. "Wake up, Rei-chan." Almost instantly, her black eyes shot open. She groaned. "I hate it when you use persuasion on me." Yet another ability from Mercury, persuasion, was similar to Charm's peak, which Aphrodite, Venus's children had, but just not as strong. Naruto was born with an abnormal affinity to persuasion, especially considering he believed everything he says, making it stronger. This was why he had been able to convince Nagato, Tsunade and other people throughout the years. The difference between persuasion and Charm's peak was that persuasion was not telling the person what to do but suggesting to do them what you wanted them to do. Fun fact, most of Mercury's children with power persuasion often went to become telemarketers and politicians. "Rise and shine, sweetheart, we have a long day ahead of us," Naruto said with a grin. Naruto jumped out of bed and walked into Reina's closet, grabbing a white toga with gold lining and a light gray toga from their hangers. He handed the white toga to his waking girlfriend, who groaned again. The gray toga had been a gift from Jason last Christmas and was awesome since it was the color of Mercury, literally and symbolically, and it had a pocket sewn into it for celery ore. For Christmas, Naruto had gotten his fellow an awesome imperial gold sword, javelin combo that shrunk into a coin. Being a jack of all trades apparently applied to forging as well. "How the hell do you put this gray curtain on?" Naruto grumbled in anger. The gray monstrosity had somehow managed to wrap itself all around him and made him hug himself, suspiciously like a straitjacket. Reina rubbed her chin in thought as she quickly put on her toga with ease. "I don't know. Maybe leaving you in a straitjacket is what's best for the world." Naruto pouted like a child. "You love me because I'm crazy." Reina smirked. "It could be the sex." Naruto rolled his eyes and struggled some more with his cloth prison. "Why aren't you this playful during the day?" "Because I have a job and a sense of responsibility, unlike a certain blonde I know," Reina said with her hands on her hips. Naruto nodded, a mock sense of seriousness on his face. "Yes, darn that Jason Grace." The edge of Reina's lip quirked upwards. "You're an idiot." "Yes, I am, but I'm your idiot," Naruto said with a smile. "Now help me get this god's damn toga on." Reina wanted to facepalm so badly. "Reina Ramirez Arellano, Praetor." "Of course," Terminus said as he checked each of the incoming senators' tattoos. The Roman god was not a full god in the traditional sense, but was in fact just a marble torso with no arms or legs that was always really grumpy and took weapons away. Naruto walked up and held a fist out to the armless statue, Terminus. Terminus nodded as he bumped the fist. "Naruto Uzumaki, Senator, 5th Cohort." Naruto knelt down and put his hand out for Julia, Terminus' 5-year-old assistant, to high-five. The little girl's eyes lit up and she slapped her hand with as much force as she could. Naruto fake winced. "Geez, Julia-chan is always trying to break my hand." Julia giggled and hid behind Terminus, who was smiling lightly, not that he would ever admit it. Naruto handed celery ore to the girl, who nodded before he continued walking past the boundary stone. Naruto looked behind him as he walked past the god and saw Percy, Frank and Hazel talking to Terminus. "Oh no, not good. Percy doesn't want Terminus on his bad side," Naruto thought to himself. It had taken months to get Terminus' trust back after Naruto painted him orange. He walked toward them as Reina had already left him to go set up the Senate, so he had time. Riptide always returns to my pocket," Naruto said to the god, who rolled his stone eyes. "Well, we'll make sure it doesn't wander off," the statue said like it was obvious. Julia nodded. Percy looked conflicted until he heard a familiar voice. "Just give her the weapon, Clambake." Percy rolled his eyes and placed his pen into the tray, looking up to the blonde teenager in the gray toga in front of him. "Really, 2 days and you're already giving me nicknames?" Naruto snickered and clapped a hand on Percy's back. "Move it or lose it, Waterboy." "Is he done yet?" Percy asked Hazel, who giggled. Naruto shook his head. "Not even close, fish sticks." Percy was about to make some joke about Naruto being fast when he looked over the hill toward New Rome. "Whoa." Naruto grinned. New Rome was spectacular, even from a teen who grew up looking down at huge village from a mountain with the faces of his ancestors carved into it. Dozens of demigods and legacies that were at least college age were all living their lives, not worrying about surviving the next day. Couples sat at cafes, drinking coffee and talking about whatever they wished. A bunch of guys that looked like legacies of Apollo were throwing a football around in the plaza, each throw a perfect spiral. Demigod couples held hands as they watched their children play in the green grass. It was Elysium on Earth for many, no more running or fighting. No more worrying if the next day would be your last. College, work, anything you once dreamt and dismissed as impossible was now a possibility. All of these guys are demigods? Percy asked in awe. Yes, are children of demigods. Legacies we call them, Hazel explained. Percy raised an eyebrow. Demigods can have kids? Well, when two people love each other, sometimes they want to have a baby. So they take off their clothes and… Naruto began only for Percy to shove his fingers into his ears and begin to hum loudly. Gods! I've already had the talk, the son of Neptune screamed. Hazel stared at the two idiots for a moment before rubbing her face with her hands in exasperation. Yeah, if they survive for long enough. Once they have 10 years of service, they can retire and live their lives in New Rome. If the Legion needs them, the veterans will come help protect the city as reserve forces, although they usually just spend their lives as civilians. Percy nodded, pondering a life outside of running and fighting. A life spent with a beautiful girl with blonde hair and gray eyes. He shook his head to get the thought out of his head and decided to change the subject. So what's a Senate meeting? Naruto snorted. An hour of Octavian bitching before there's a vote. Sounds lovely. Percy mumbled under his breath as the four demigods entered the grand white building before them. Percy groaned as he entered the Senate building. It reminded him of a high school lecture hall. He hated lectures. ADHD always seemed to act it up whenever he was in one. That poor pigeon. No one deserves to be hit with a pineapple flying at 30 miles per hour. The back seats were filled with dozens of ghosts while Nico stood guard. Read as to shut up any ghosts who were being annoying. The front was taken mostly by the 10 senators, although Octavian was standing with his knife and beanie babies ready. Good luck, Naruto said. He gave Percy and Frank a clap on the back before he disappeared, reappearing next to Reina, who nodded. For today's meeting we will forego formalities as they will take too much time. The quest must begin in an hour, Reina said with a glance at the clock on the wall. We will not debate the quest as it was given by Mars Ultor himself and we shall obey his wishes. Frank Zhang has chosen his 3 companions, Reina announced. Frank gave a nervous wave to the Senate. Immediately there was roars of outrage. 4 questers. Blasphemy. Tradition. Robert from the 2nd stood up. All 4 from the 5th? Is that wise? Now, Robert, I wouldn't doubt our skills if I were you, Naruto said with a single finger in the air. A ball of swirling energy came into existence from the tip and sat there silently. All of the Centurions gulped at the sight of the Rasengan. Frank Zhang has chosen Hazel Levesque, Percy Jackson and Naruto Uzumaki to accompany him on his quest to Alaska, Reina continued. This is crazy. Frank Zhang isn't even a full member of the Legion. A quest must be led by a Centurion or someone of an even higher rank. Alaire shouted from the back. We must obey our patron god's wishes even if it causes. Reina seemed to look for the right term for a moment. A slight change in tradition. Frank Zhang, please step down, Octavian announced. Frank gulped before walking down to where Reina, Octavian and Naruto were standing. Naruto was grinning and giving him a subtle thumbs up while Octavian was glaring at him. Reina was as usual, neutral. It is my pleasure, Octavian said, forcing out the last word, to bestow upon you the mural crown for being first over the walls in siege warfare. Octavian handed him a bronze badge shaped like a laurel wreath. Naruto glared at the legacy of Apollo with as much killing intent as possible before he groaned and pulled out a bronze crescent. Well, Frankie, it's my actual pleasure to award you the title of Centurion, Naruto said with a grin as he placed the badge into Frank's hands. Silence. Octavian roared in as loud a voice he could muster without his voice cracking. Our praetor recognizes that no one below the rank of Centurion may lead a quest. For good or ill, Frank must lead this quest, so our praetor has decreed that Frank Zhang must be made Centurion. Naruto sent another glare towards Octavian as he knew exactly what the prat was trying to imply. He was trying to put the blame on Reina if anything went wrong, and Octavian was just a loyal Roman who did as he was told. That shithead, Reina is the praetor and you will respect her decisions, Naruto ordered. And if I hear any complaining or bitching, I will shove a Rasen Shuriken up each of your asses and blast you to Neptune. Once again, there was simultaneous audible gulp from all of the Romans in the room, including the ghosts. Frank looked like he was about to piss himself from the killing intent while Hazel and Reina were about to facepalm. There was an open spot for Centurion as one of our best, Reina explained and gestured toward the redhead in the front row. Gwen, Centurion of the 5th has decided to go into retirement. We thank you for your 10 years of service and wish you luck in retirement. Gwen. Naruto yelled to the heavens. He appeared next to the girl and hugged her tightly while the girl just sighed and waited for it to end. She'd known Naruto for long enough to know that she couldn't break from his grip when he was excited. As if she had her own super speed, Hazel appeared behind Naruto with an angry scowl and slammed a fist onto his head. Ow! Zelly-chan is so mean. Naruto cried out in pain. Not that it really hurt, but it was the principle of the thing. Meanies. May we continue? Reina asked with an annoyed look on her face. Naruto nodded and reappeared in front of Frank, an actual serious look on his face for the first time. Frank Zhang, son of Mars, has been approved for the first year of his service in the 12th Legion Fulminata. Do you swear to serve and protect the Legion? Naruto asked, his voice stern and powerful. This wasn't the normal Naruto who could kid around in the face of a Scorpio ballista or make a bad pun on a moment's notice. No, this was the Naruto that was prepared for war. This was the Naruto who defended his village from a gravity-wielding madman defeated him at age 16. This was the Naruto who would defend his friends and what he stood for till his breathing stopped. He would never run away, never go back on his word. That was his nindo. His ninja way. All nervousness in Frank was gone in that moment as he realized the responsibility he was going to accept. After taking a deep breath, he steeled himself. I swear, Naruto smirked. Try not to bite your tongue. Senatus Populusque Romanus. The senators roared in unison. Divine fire burst to life on Frank's arm and terror sparked to life on the Canadian's face as the fire seared marks into his skin. Eternally tattooed onto his skin was SPQR over a set of crossed spears, and under it all, a single line of service. Welcome to Badassery, Frankie, Naruto said as he gave Frank a clap on the back. Frank stumbled for a moment before he walked to where Hazel was jumping up and down in happiness. Now moving on, Octavian said like he was glad it was over. Do you have any plans for the quest? There was no response as Frank was in deep conversation with Hazel and Percy. Centurion Frank, Octavian shouted. Frank jumped. Did you hear the question? Octavian shouted impatiently. Frank shook his head. Octavian sent a look toward the Senate as if to say, what did I tell you guys? I was asking if you had any plans. Any idea where you're going or what you're going to do? Octavian asked, a look of slight annoyance in his eyes. Hazel stood up and put her hands on her hips. Weren't you listening last night, or were you too busy trying to kiss Mars' ass? We're going to Alaska. That's my girl, Naruto grinned. Everyone seemed to shuffle at the name of the cursed land. Some of the ghosts shimmered and disappeared as if they were afraid to be seen. Finally Larry stood. I know what Mars said, but that's insane. Alaska is cursed. And not in the normal, oh hey look a ghost way. Anyone who goes to Alaska dies. It's filled to the brim with monsters and the gods can't help at all. No demigod has try. Since you lost your eagle, Percy cut in. Percy sighed and ruffled his black hair for a moment before standing up. Look, Percy continued. I know I'm new here. I know you guys don't like to mention that massacre in the 1980s. He mentioned it. One of the ghosts whimpered before flicking out of existence. But think out it for a minute. Percy continued. The 5th cohort led that expedition. We failed, and we have to be responsible for making things right. That's why Mars is sending us. This giant, the son of Gaia, he's the one who defeated your forces 30 years ago. I'm sure of it. Now he's sitting up there in Alaska with a chained death god, and all your old equipment. He's mustering his armies and sending them south to attack this camp. Really? Octavian said. You seem to know a lot about our enemy's plans, Percy Jackson. Naruto slammed his hands onto the table between him and Octavian with enough force to shatter it, his eyes golden and toad-like. Hey Octavian, why don't you go stab a teddy bear and give us some useful information instead of questioning the loyalty of my friends? Naruto growled. Or else the next person to have a pelum through their chest is going to be you and you're not going to come back. Octavian took a step forward. Is that a threat? I'm in August? Naruto turned around and faced toward the Senate, although his next words were audible. It's not a threat, it's a promise. Octavian paled like a ghost before he took a step back and sat down. This quest is going to happen and the four of us are going to Alaska. There we will meet the children of Gia and we must defeat them to free Thanatos or else Gia will rise. That is all we know, Naruto said with a cross of his arms. Reina raised an eyebrow. Children? I thought there was only one son of Gia holding. She hesitated. The death god. Nico stood up. Naruto and I have been discussing this information among ourselves and have come to the conclusion that there has to be at least two giants working together to stop death. Hazel stood up, her fingers poking together like a certain white-eyed girl Naruto once knew. One of them is Alcyoneus. Reina turned toward her, confusion and suspicion on her face. How do you know Hazel? Naruto jumped to Hazel's defense, but Nico already had it covered. Each giant corresponds to at least one Olympian. Porphyrion is the bane of Jupiter, a giant made specifically to combat the king of the gods. Alcyoneus is the anti-Pluto, so we know of him from our father. Reina didn't seem convinced but didn't push the matter further, although she did send a glare toward Naruto that said, "You're explaining later." As hard as the Titans were to kill, the giants are harder. While they may not each have their own domains, they can only be killed by a god and demigod working together, Naruto explained. Immediately there was roars of disbelief. Gods and demigods, that's impossible. It's happened before. In the First War, Hercules and Dionysus worked with the Olympians and helped defeat all of the giants. Nico explained. If it could happen now, I don't know. Alcyoneus is different as he is completely immortal as long as he is in his home territory. Neither god nor demigod can kill him as long as he is where he was born, which in this case is Alaska, Naruto said. First, I need to understand something. Percy turned towards Nico and Naruto. I thought Pluto was the god of the dead. Now I hear about this other guy, Thanatos, and the doors of death from that prophecy, the prophecy of 8. What does all that mean? Nico took a deep breath. Okay. Pluto is the god of the underworld, but the actual god of death, the one who's responsible for making sure souls go to the afterlife and stay there, that's Pluto's lieutenant, Thanatos. He's like, well, imagine life and death are two different countries. Everybody would like to be in life, right? So there's a guarded border to keep people from crossing back over without permission. But it's a big border, with lots of holes in the fence. Pluto tries to seal up the breaches, but new ones keep popping up all the time. That's why he depends on Thanatos, who's like the police. Thanatos catches souls, Percy said, and deports them back to the underworld. Exactly, Nico said. But now Thanatos has been captured, chained up. Frank raised his hand. How do you chain death? It's been done before, Nico said. Hercules wrestled him to the ground and a few other people have chained Thanatos to stop him. And now a giant has captured him, Percy said. Naruto nodded. Reina rubbed the bridge of her nose. So, if we could free Thanatos, then the dead would stay dead? It's a bit more complicated than that, Naruto said. Octavian rolled his eyes. Why does that not surprise me? You mean the doors of death, Reina said, ignoring Octavian. They are mentioned in the prophecy of 8, which sent the first expedition to Alaska. Julius the Ghost rolled his eyes. We all know how that turned out. We Larrys remember. The other ghosts grumbled in agreement. Nico put his finger to his lips. Suddenly all the Larrys went silent like their mouths had been glued together. Thanatos is only one part of the equation, Nico explained. The doors of death, well, there are many ways into the underworld. With Thanatos imprisoned, all those exits will be easier to use. Sometimes it might work to our advantage and let a friendly soul come back like Gwen. More often, it will benefit evil souls and monsters, the sneaky ones who are already looking to escape. Now, the doors of death, those are the personal doors of Thanatos, his fast lane between life and death. Only Thanatos is supposed to Know where they are, and the location shifts over the ages. If I understand correctly, the doors of death have been forced open. Gaia's minions have seized control of them. Which means Gaia controls who can come back from the dead, Percy guessed. Naruto nodded. She can pick and choose who to let out the worst monsters, the most evil souls. If we can rescue Thanatos, that means at least he can catch souls again and send them below. Monsters will die when we kill them and we'll get a little breathing room. But unless we're able to retake the doors of death, our enemies won't stay down for long. They'll have an easy way back to the world of the living. So we can catch them and deport them, Percy summed up, but they'll just keep coming back across. In a depressing nutshell, yes, Nico said. Naruto grinned. He loved Nico's humor sometimes, even if they were talking about the end of the world. Frank scratched his head. But Thanatos knows where the doors are, right? If we free him, he can retake them. Not really. Naruto pointed out. Well, at least not alone. To take back the doors would mean to defeat whatever forces Gaia has put there and prevent the goddess herself from helping. That would take a massive quest, an army of the best demigods. Foes bear arms to the doors of death, Reina said. That's the prophecy of 8. Naruto shot his girlfriend a glance and immediately wanted to hold her. He knew she was holding everything in and was barely keeping it together, like a Puerto Rican Elsa. He knew what she was worrying about. The world was ending and she was in charge of one of the only rebel forces. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had to win. Billions of lives were at stake. If this begins the ancient prophecy, we don't have resources to send an army to these doors of death and protect the camp. I can't imagine even sparing 8 demigods, Reina mumbled. First things first. Percy tried to sound confident, though he could feel the level of panic rising in the room. I don't know who the 8 are, or what that old prophecy means, exactly. But first we have to free Thanatos. Mars told us we only needed 4 people for the quest to Alaska. Let's concentrate on succeeding with that and getting back before the Feast of Fortuna. Then we can worry about the doors of death. Yeah, Frank said with a gulp. That's probably enough for 1 week. So you do have a plan? Octavian asked skeptically. Percy looked at his teammates. We go to Alaska as fast as possible. And we improvise, Hazel said. A lot, Frank added. We're going to be the fucking Roman MacGyvers. Naruto finished. He took a sip of green tea in a can and crossed his arms in defiance. Reina studied them. She looked like she was mentally writing her own obituary. Very well, she said. Nothing remains except for us to vote on what support we can give the quest: transportation, money, magic, weapons. Praetor, if I may, Octavian said. Oh, great, Percy muttered. Here comes the bitching. The camp is in grave danger, Octavian said. 2 gods have warned us we will be attacked 4 days from now. We must not spread our resources too thin, especially by funding projects that have a slim chance of success. Octavian looked at the 4 of them with pity. Mars has clearly chosen the least likely candidates for this quest. Perhaps that is because he considers them the most expendable. Perhaps Mars is playing the long odds. Whatever the case, he wisely didn't order a massive expedition, nor did he ask us to fund their adventure. I say we keep our resources here and defend the camp. This is where the battle will be lost or won. If these 4 succeed, wonderful. But they should do so by their own ingenuity. An uneasy murmur passed through the crowd. The can in Naruto's hand was crushed in his grip. He stood up, his eyes a bright crimson. You know what, Octavian? You talk a lot of crap, but the reason why you didn't get chosen for the quest is because you're a weak little shit. You hide behind your teddy bears and the power of your cohort when anyone, Naruto gestured around the room, here could kick your ass. Words won't help when the army comes on the Feast of Fortuna. Naruto sat back down and crossed his arms again, staring directly into the legacy of Apollo's soul. We are not the most expendable, in fact, we are the only ones that can do the job. Frank jumped to his feet to add something, but Percy stopped him before he could throw fuel into the fire. Know what? We don't need any help. But at least give us transportation. Gaia is the Earth goddess, right? Going overland, across the Earth, I'm guessing we should avoid that. Plus, it'll be too slow. Octavian laughed. Would you like a limo or a sand buggy? Would you like us to charter you an airplane? Percy flinched at the thought. No air travel, I have a feeling that would be bad, too. But a boat. Can you at least give us a boat? Hazel made a grunting sound and Naruto put an arm around her shoulders to comfort her. A boat. Octavian turned to the senators. The son of Neptune wants a boat. Sea travel has never been the Roman way, but he isn't much of a Roman. Naruto coughed into his hand, but it sounded suspiciously like, neither are you. Octavian, Reina said with a death glare. A boat is little enough to ask, and providing no other aid seems very traditional. Octavian exclaimed, cutting her off. It is very traditional. Let us see if these questers have the strength to survive without help. Like true Romans. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the stupidity of the argument. Are you mental? This quest determines the survival of the camp. We don't succeed, the camp falls under an army that cannot die. You want to make your survival even less likely? More muttering filled the chamber. The senator's eyes moved back and forth between Octavian, Naruto and Reina, watching the test of wills. Reina straightened in her chair. Very well, she said coldly. We'll put it to a vote. Senators, the motion is as follows. The quest shall go to Alaska. The Senate shall provide full access to the Roman navy docked at Alameda. No other aid will be forthcoming. The 4 adventurers will survive or fail on their own merits. All in favor? Every senator's hand went up. The motion is passed. Reina turned to Frank. Centurion, your party is excused. The Senate has other matters to discuss. Naruto, you are excused for the remainder of the meeting. Naruto nodded and followed his team out. As soon as they walked out, Hazel picked up a large emerald from the path and slipped it in her pocket. So, we're pretty much toast? Frank nodded miserably. If any of you wants to back out, I wouldn't blame you. Are you kidding me? Hazel said, and pull sentry duty for the rest of the week? Naruto grinned and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Frankie, what would you do without me? Be sane. Hazel pointed out. Naruto's sweat dropped. Fair enough. Frank managed a smile. He turned to Percy. Percy gazed across the forum and Naruto knew the feeling. The feeling if you didn't help, everyone would die. I'm with you, he told Frank. Besides, I want to check out the Roman navy. They were only halfway across the forum when someone called, Jackson. Percy turned and saw Octavian jogging towards them. What do you want? Percy asked. Octavian smiled. Already decided I'm your enemy. That's a rash choice, Percy. I'm a loyal Roman. Celerior was at his throat in an instant. Naruto growled. I should gut you like the fish you are. Octavian's eyes widened at the sight of the weapon pressed against his jugular. How did you get weapons inside of New Rome? I have my ways. Naruto mumbled. Never forget Octavian, cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once, he recited to the now cross-eyed legacy of Apollo. Naruto. Don't ever try to cross me again, Octavian, or I won't be so forgiving next time. Octavian started to nod furiously, careful not to touch the blade. Naruto sheathed Celerior and Octavian immediately ran off as far as he could from the son of Mercury. Percy smirked. That was badass as hell. Naruto turned around and grinned. All the killing intent he had just showed Octavian in was gone. He threw an arm around Percy and Frank's shoulders and began to walk them back to the 5th's barracks. Let's go, we got a camp to save. Chapter 4's done and we can move on to the actual quest soon. I got in some Naruto, Reina in the beginning so I'm happy and I got to insult Octavian in one chapter. It's been a good day. BTW, some of you guys may have noticed something. The title has changed. Run for the safe houses. OHK sorry. I wasn't happy with Celerior so I decided to change it to something a little easier of the tongue. Celerior will still be the name of Naruto's sword however. Sorry if it threw you off. Thanks for reading. Review please. P.S. The person who can correctly guess Naruto's fatal flaw gets a cookie. Pente I don't own Percy Jackson and the Olympians, heroes of Olympus or Naruto. They are all the property of their respective owners. Son of the Traveler and Sage of Rome, son of Neptune Chapter 5, that damned book. It was the afternoon after the Senate meeting and it had been a long day. After an awkward lunch and preventing Terminus from turning Percy into a cockroach, the 4 Romans had hopped on a BART train. Despite his time in Tartarus and the underworld in general, Naruto still aided trains. It wasn't the claustrophobic conditions that would bother most people but the train itself. A giant steel box moving that you had almost no control over? No, thank you. Percy had kept most of his old stuff along with some extra clothes courtesy of Naruto, who was friends with the manager of New Rome convenience store. Although Percy did look a little awkward in a purple shirt. Sticking out of the back pocket of his jeans was his trusty ballpoint pen that Percy obviously used to write the complex stories he loved so much. Naruto could barely think of that with a straight face. Hazel had slung a bag over her Camp Jupiter shirt and her light brown aviator jacket, a gift from Naruto so she could match her brother. Her Stygian iron spatha was wrapped in a sheet and strapped to her back, but you could still feel the cold radiating off of it. Frank fiddled with a canteen of nectar strapped to his hip so it was strapped correctly. He had already packed a few packets of ambrosia along with a few extra quivers since running out of arrows was one of the worst situations for an archer. He had strapped his bow and dragon tooth spear to his back, careful to wrap them so they looked less like deadly weapons and more like hockey gear. Naruto adjusted his black jacket and resealed one of the many hidden scroll pockets on it. The jacket sat on top of Naruto's ever-present Camp Jupiter shirt, which itself hid a mesh armor shirt. Celery ore was already in his pocket along with an orange book that Hazel had made him promise not to read in public. She had been trying to take it for at least a month, but Naruto's agility and sealing techniques made it impossible for the young girl to take it from him for good. Next stop. Oakland, the speakers announced. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. Huh, it's odd hearing the announcer for once. I'm used to New York's subway speakers. New York? What were you doing in New York? Frank asked, confused. New York was known to be incredibly dangerous to all Roman demigods, and not many demigods had the guts to go into the nest of the monsters. Naruto stuttered before reaching into his pocket and pulling out the orange book to avoid answering.